Ding dong. Welcome. Hello, everyone. We are live on the Hermetic Circle. Today we'll talk about all things Hermetic, Gnostic, Neoplatonic. We're here with our boy, American Esoteric, the modern Hermeticist. Well, actually, no, that's a different guy, but son of Hermes. Son of Hermes.
Yes. How are we doing? Good to be back.
We are doing good. Well, yeah, I made a little hiccup with some time zones, so we'll see if Shant joins us, but if he doesn't, we'll just have to do it again.
Sounds good.
Damn. So how's it been, man? How's it been?
It's been good. It's been good. Doing a lot of writing. Researching some of the Chinese philosophers and the Taoists.
I was gonna say, how do you do it, man? How do you pump out this many because I was like, when your Robert Flood video came on, I was like, oh damn, this is so good. I can't wait to ask him about it. And then he did another one, and then he did another one. I'm like, god damn it, how does he do it?
Yeah, it's a lot. And I'm trying to figure out if I need to like do a couple shorter ones, just quick 10-minute ones or whatnot, because I'm doing the long form and I'm trying to keep them as long and in depth as possible. But yeah, man, I love it. I just sink into the research for like sometimes like with Synesius, it was like a month and a half. I was learning everything I could about him, and then finally got around to starting writing it, and it was just all sort of pouring out. But
yeah,
I'm glad that it seems like the volume is there, because for me, there's always this kind of like, all right, on to the next.
God damn. Americans, man. Americans.
Yeah, it's like we have this unhealthy relationship with the pressure to be productive sometimes.
God damn. Yeah, because I really want to, like, the Taoist one was really interesting. What was kind of your like first inroad into Taoism?
Well, so my brother, I want to say about 6 years ago, he took a deep journey into China and into Asia, and he spent about 3 months up in the Wudang Mountains studying Taoism with like a lineage. And there was the language barrier there, but there was a couple people who like knew English. And he learned Qigong from like on the top of the Wudang Mountains, beautiful area. There's definitely like an ancient lineage there. And he brought back like all of these different forms and whatnot. He sort of brought it back to our farm, and was teaching me the ways a little bit. And so he was kind of always there to like tell me what they thought in the living traditions of, at least in the Wudang Mountains. I want to say he was in this particular area training for like a month and a half, but he was around he was exposed to Taoism and even Chinese Buddhism and Thai Buddhism for like a fair amount of months while he was backpacking around.
Interesting.
So that was like, he provided a kind of an insider's eye into the living tradition there. And what he was bringing back, I was like, that really resonates with me, because it's like the flow state, and it's like grace, like Taoism is opening your door with the sense of grace. It's walking upstairs with the sense there's like it's always with you, right? And I resonate with that. That communicates even through the English translations, very well.
That kind of, yeah. There's some interesting kind of, I find, like overlaps between like Taoism and the Western tradition, especially in their ceremony. I think because maybe it's like celestial, like they base it on the stars, and there's just this weird zodiacal overlap you see sometimes in some kind, like, magic squares. Oh, hello. I think Abbas has joined us, but he hasn't connected his stuff up yet. We'll see if he gets his technical difficulties gone. But no, there's like, it's because it seems like, Babylon, astrology, astronomy, and then it forks out of Babylon. It goes down into Egypt, Greece, and that's how we get it in the West. But it also goes down into China, and there seems to be this like a really long arc, but there seems to be this kind of connection almost. Like I swear to God, if you know the square of Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
the that has a cognate in Chinese Taoism in their ceremonial magic systems, and so their kind of sigils have a very similar kind of uh, well, not feel or even like it's like their sigils have a similar function almost.
Hmm.
It's really interesting. And
So do you think it's a geographic diffusion going on? Because I'm increasingly, well, I'll let you answer that first.
well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Because they also have, like, their cosmology is very emanation hierarchy. It's not exactly diamonds and monads, but it's like they got jade emperors and gods all over
Mm.
the place. And so it's an interesting celestial ecology, but there is this Persian connection. Because I was doing a study a little while back on the White Lotus.
Mm.
And there's this, if you go back far enough, there's this weird thing where the White Lotus actually appears in a temple of Pure Land Buddhism that had absorbed a huge amount of Manichaean Gnosticism. So the Manichaean Gnostics, so the Gnostics from Persia came up the Silk Road and had all these temples all around China, and them and the Pure Land Buddhists just absorbed into each other.
Yeah.
And they were creating a syncretic tradition, but then they were suppressed, and so it went underground, and that is the White Lotus. The White Lotus is literally Buddhist Gnostic, kind of eschatological, the weird guys. Yeah. It's like, huh, interesting.
Yeah, I've seen some arguments as well that there's some Zoroastrian Mazdaism, or at least some Zoroastrian cosmology that appears to go in there. But then there is the situation where, you know, you have the White Lotus, like near-death experiences from the masters, and then how those experiences become, you know, extremely influential to how the school moves on. So there's still this kind of debate as far as, should we look at it purely syncretically, or should we look at it more on the experiential grounds? And it's not like they're mutually exclusive, right? Both of these things can happen at once. But, you know, I'm just digging in there, and there's so much to study. It's fascinating.
100%. That's Taoism is one of my long loves. I know there's something waiting for me in there. I just gotta find the time and dig deep into it. But yeah, there's I've heard some things about the Wudang Mountains, and was it the Longman Pai tradition? I think that's the one that your brother must have been initiated into. It's called, like, it says Longman Pai, like, whatever, but I think it translates to Dragon Gate, and so it sounds awesome. Dragon Gate tradition.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him about some of those specifics. He kept like a decent amount of journals and everything about his travels, but
okay.
But yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, dog, and also that Robert Flood video. Robert Flood's another guy who I've been interested in, and then you just like make a video on him, like, God damn it!
Oh, there's so much to dig into, though. Even it's like, that's the thing. I feel like even with an hour on some of these subjects, you're still just barely scratching the surface. You know, you might be surprised how much I actually cut from my scripts, like, often.
Damn.
And then I'm trying to post the longer versions, you know, on Substack or something like that. Because I have to cut so much in the edit just to try to simplify it a little bit. And it's like, well, I don't really need to dig super deep into the particulars there, you know. Let's just give a Learjet's perspective of it, and it still ends up being, you know, kind of long.
Well, what was your feel on, like, Robert Flood? Because people just see him as an alchemist, but to me, he just seemed like the perfect ideal of a Renaissance man. Like, he was everything. Psychologist,
it's hard to,
like, true philosopher.
That's right. It's hard to pigeonhole so many of these thinkers. You know, even just calling someone a Neoplatonist, it doesn't always send the message across, right? But Flood, you know, he was, in his, like, mosaical philosophy, you know, he was essentially he had, like, a universalist project based on the idea that the books of Moses were the kind of origin point there, you know.
Interesting.
And that's the whole mosaic. So he was willing to tap back into Hermes Trismegistus and, you know, all the Platonists, Zoroaster, all of the different guys that had been a part of, let's say, the Golden Chain Renaissance, universal sort of comparative projects. He was digging right into those, so he will like everybody. A lot of people are doing this through the Renaissance and even the Enlightenment. They have to like make these disclaimers before they get around to the pagans, but then when they get around to it, they're like, yeah, they were developing language around the first principle and all these different things that then was adopted through the early Christian fathers. And you see that very plainly with like Pseudo Dionysius and so forth, that they're borrowing or redeveloping or however you want to phrase it. yeah and then they're putting into a new Christianized kind of worldview, and then it takes a life of its own, and there's all these second order effects that start influencing how like stained glass windows are developed in certain areas. So yeah, that's I like going back in and figuring out. What I'm trying to do right now is figure out where these early comparative projects were going on, and we see this with Ficino and Pico and even Flood and so forth. These Bruno was doing a lot of this. He didn't have these sort of limitations where he wasn't going to study this tradition or that tradition. So a lot of these anti-universalist arguments, they're pretending that the comparative projects, they happened like from the Enlightenment and after that, but no, Megasthenes and all these ancients were already comparing the different traditions. So it's fascinating to me.
They were all looking for that tradition that goes back to one place. Are you an Atlantis enjoyer, American Esoteric? Did we get into that in the last one?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Tell us about your Atlantean dreams.
Well, I want to say hello to Abbas as well.
Yeah, I think he's still got some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we can.
Oh, okay. My goodness.
We're in.
We're in.
Sorry, guys. Can I just give a formal apology? I messed up the dates again.
Oh my goodness. It's all good. We're all here.
Good.
Yes.
It managed to work out. Glad to virtually meet you.
Yes.
Yes, likewise. Yes.
So is this also the first time we're getting the lion-headed alchemist and the son of Hermes together?
Yes, indeed.
That's right.
Okay. Nice. This is the first time you guys have met. Excellent. Perfect. Or like face to face, voice to voice.
That's right.
Somewhat.
And we're in 3 different countries, so we got a little international representation going on here.
That's right.
Indeed. It's dare I say universal.
We're embodying the world's soul, at least a portion of it, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
It's activity.
Yeah, I've just been enjoying hearing the conversation. So, and of course having technical difficulties on my end. So apologies again for my late arrival.
All good. You sound perfect.
Yeah, I'm not too echoey, am I? Yeah, I feel I'm kind of like in a random room here.
No, you sound good. At least on my end. Everyone in chat.
Sounds great. I'll be right back. I got to plug something in. Be right back.
Okay, yeah, sure. Oh, we just got a Hobo Knight as a new member. Thank you, Hobo Knight.
Hobo Knight.
Some of these names. Have you ever looked through your subscriber list and been like, oh boy?
I've seen some interesting usernames. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. A Bro Talon says audio good, so you're good.
Okay.
Good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I think I was just about to ask American on his love of Atlantis, did we talk about Atlantis as well? Have we talked about Atlantis?
I don't think we had. I think I commented once on one of your videos when you were analyzing Manly P. Hall and he was referencing Atlantis. I remember I did make a comment. Yeah, but we haven't talked about it in any great length.
Well, what's your? I'll lay out my Atlantis take, because I find Atlantis is, because I see myself as not a true perennialist, but I'm a bit of a soft perennialist. I like the idea that there's this eternal thing that emanates into the world, and at one point there was a capital T tradition, something that what we have now, all of our traditions we have now, they're all beautiful, but they all have fragments, they all have pieces. and the pieces harken back to this one Atlantean tradition, whatever it may be. And we may never get back there, but it's like, it's almost this backwards project. We begin to rescue the past and bring it into the future. Or can we reverse this if we're talking about it in time and eternity? We rescue the future from the past. That's maybe the better way to put it. But it's like, yeah, it's like Atlantis is important even as a myth because it orients us. It's even a narrative. It connects with us. And so that's like, at the barest bones, that's why it's kind of important to me as this kind of river, this stream out from Eden.
It very much, it shows the power of the myth and its purpose, one of the many purposes that it can serve. But also, speaking of sort of giving birth in the present, giving birth to the past in the present is something that Carl Jung's entire project was about. So it was about a renewal, rather than just looking through dusty papers and old philosophies and having a very antiquarian view of things just for the sake of preserving them. He meant to re-enliven them and to reinvigorate them so that they did have a power and numinosity in the present to help us, in our therapy of our souls. So I think to your point, I think everything that we do is sort of a transformation of the past and a giving birth into the present. So and Atlantis as a myth is, for that reason, it's timeless, right? It's eternal. So it's exactly has an inexhaustible amount of resources for us to sort of rejuvenate our lives and the world that we live in, right?
100%. 100%. It's like, and it's always, and I like what you said, it's like, it's about a rebirth. It's not about necromancy or cold archaeology. It's like, we want rebirth. We want something living.
Yeah.
And there's seeds there. There are seeds there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's an element in which they say that, the god of Jung was Phanes, right? And that Phanes is the god, the protogonos, the one who is born from the Orphic egg, and that sense of sort of like that sense of there's a phanesthai. It's sort of that sense of appearance and emerging. The thing that underlies, like in a metaphysical sense, that sense of like illumination, again, shows that sense of birth, of that renewal, of that sort of psychic, sort of energetic activity that kind of like breaks through and comes alive and renews the cosmos. So I think that is also very fitting, given Jung's kind of very secret, more occulted understanding of Phanes and his sympathy with that Orphic tradition as well.
Indeed. Were you going to say something, Colin?
Yeah, I tend to, I guess, I tend to think that Plato was that Atlantis wasn't, like, he was speaking on historical terms. I do get the sense that that he was talking about Atlantis as if it did, it really was this multi-island civilization that had power. It did exist, and it was somehow or another related to the ancient history of, obviously, Athens, and then connected with Egypt, of course. I mean, it seems like the research that we would all want to happen to develop a more literal and historic based, Atlantis. This is kind of a catch-all phrase. We don't have to get hung on that particular term, because the term is kind of a stand-in for the idea that there is this relatively advanced civilization that exists during the Ice Age, and it kind of, all it does is it represents a civilization that's just a little bit earlier than the archaeological record has been able to show thus far. But then we got things like Göbekli Tepe and Karan Tepe and so forth. And then we realized, well, wait, there were megalithic civilizations right after the Ice Age, if not, planning their projects during the Ice Age. The water had to go somewhere, right? It did have to go somewhere. That something probably happened. I'm not too conclusive about it all, but yes, privately, I flirt very, very strongly with the idea that Atlantis, did exist. And I actually, my pet sort of theory, what I entertain, is that instead of looking too close to the Straits of Gibraltar, we actually need to come like back to the Bahamas, back to the Yucatan area, and closer to America, because if there are a lot of East Coast Native American myths that sort of like, why are y'all talking about people coming out of the waters, from the east, and founding your civilization? There's something to be said about that. Tenochtitlan, I mean, that civilization in itself, if they were looking back to like their ancient predecessors, just like the Egyptians were, who were those ancient predecessors? There's at least a little bit of a fragment here or there that they came from the island of Aztlan and so forth. So there, we have these fragments, and it's just like, I mean, it's tempting to buy into it, completely. It's just a little hard. You want to have the concrete evidence at some point. You want to see the pyramids under the water, at some point. And I think there's like a big thirst for that. Where are the hall of records that Edgar Cayce said is going to tell us the full story? So we're still like, we're waiting for a little bit more, concrete evidence. But yeah, it's good stuff.
I sense, is this a new video coming up? American Atlantis, the tale of Quetzalcoatl.
I do want to do one on Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis. I do want to do one on that. Yeah,
that's original. That's the one of Blavatsky's main source as well.
Yeah. He's he's hated on for, I think, just some of the default cultural views that he had at the time, and some of the racializing that was going on. But if you're able to set that aside, there is some fascinating stuff in the research, and it's just like, we can suspend our disbelief a little bit and just have some fun with some of these subjects, and not be too uptight about it all. So that's how I would approach it a little bit.
As for evidence goes, if I can also jump in, how do you feel about people claiming that they have past lives in Atlantis, or using some kind of occult means to gain a kind of knowledge of Atlantis?
I mean, I'm open-minded. I'm open-minded to the idea that that you could tap into something like that. I personally, I always frame reincarnation in like non-linear terms. So it's, a past life is like a misnomer, because it would be, this is how I see it. It would be multiple simultaneous incarnations, because now is the only moment. Time is just the measurement of celestial objects relative to one another, right? So if now is the only moment, we are possibly able to connect with, if it's relevant, the different simultaneous incarnations that, let's just say our oversoul is having. So yeah, I'm open-minded to that stuff. And I mean, there's good solid reincarnation research that's been done. I mean, Ian Stevenson, just to name the closest one, right? And I've met people that have been put in hypnosis, and the things that come through, the things that they see, they'll have like a scar on their back, or like pain, in their back, and under some hypnosis, they like live out, this one woman I know, this happened to her, and she was kind of straight edge too, but she was sort of put into this hypnotic, trance state, and relived how she felt the experience was. She was reliving getting like speared in the back in one of her more, I guess, indigenous lives, if you will, and then she has like residual kind of tension there. So strange, bizarre stuff. Yeah.
I mean, that's how Edgar Cayce got started, through hypnosis. He was hypnotized and just started speaking like crazy stuff. But I remember, I think it was the guy who ran the Edgar Cayce Foundation, was this guy who had read through the entire library of all of Edgar Cayce's, what would you call it, remote viewings, or his readings. And he said one thing he said in here, I watched an interview in New Thinking Aloud, Jeffrey Mishlov's channel, if we all know that. Plug for Jeffrey. But he was interviewing, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who runs the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and that guy said a lot of some of the stuff that Edgar Cayce says is complete, like, how would you even do it? Like, one person, he got sent a letter via an Italian woman, and in the letter was like, my son is sick, blah blah blah. And Edgar Casey, basically his message was to tell her to walk down this street, go down here, go to this clinic, ask the practitioners for this specific medicine. They'll say they won't have it. Ask them again, plead with them to look on this shelf behind like a kind of a thing. And it's like he gave this super, super minute, detailed like a follow-up of what to do, and they kind of like, oh, okay. And the other thing is he didn't speak Italian, so it's like he just kind of put the letter to his head or whatever, and then he said that, and they kind of machine translated into Italian and sent it off, and like hopefully it works. And the Italian lady actually got back and was like, recounted the story of her going to the clinic, pleading with them, they saying they don't have it, just, and she was like, please just look. And they actually came back completely shocked and surprised, like, how did you know? We actually, this forgotten kind of bottle was behind another bottle on this exact shelf that you were telling us, what's wrong with you, lady? Here, take it, whatever. And like, you hear that and you're like, what the hell's going on with Edgar Casey? But then his history stuff is a little bit not suspicious, but the guy's basically what he said was when people come in to be healed, it's like their intention is pure. It's like, I just want to be healed. But people who came in with history stuff, specifically like, I want to know what happened in ancient Egypt, it's almost like they have this desire. And the desire, the impure intention kind of almost like corrupted the attempt in a way. And he said a lot of some of the Edgar Casey stuff for Egypt worked, and some of it was just like, no, this is completely wrong. And I was like, interesting. And so there's this almost like this falsification if they desired it too much. And so especially the stuff on Atlantis becomes suspicious unless you are able to, I don't know, go through Steiner and Blavatsky and correlate some things together or contrast it with some other data. But it seems that there is this this glass that becomes darkly depending on its intention, which is interesting.
Well, with I want to comment on something you said without taking up too much time, but because there's a tendency, I think, to look into these remote figures and myths and think that these are somehow more special because they're very far away. Like I used to go to the ARE library almost every weekend at some point in my junior year of high school and senior year. I had a lot of friends. We were going there and meditating in the garden and area. I knew some of the staff, but I was able to read. They have binders, this whole wall filled with binders of his readings. It's something like 16,000 to even more readings that he gave, which is an ungodly amount of readings, right? And so, my grandfather, who was one of the first practicing doctors in the area of Virginia Beach, he had patients that went to Edgar Casey and got readings from him, while he was alive, obviously.
Wow.
And they would come into his practice, his office, and tell him, this guy, my grandpa is not religious or spiritual at all. He's very much agnostic, and he'll forget all the things I tell him, and then continue to kind of like, he doesn't know what he believes, kind of deal, right? But he always says, when I ask him about this, that the stories that he heard from Edgar Casey, there was no possible way that he could explain it or that anyone could could refute it, and that it always stuck with him that there's something stronger there. But to bring it back around, yes, Edgar Casey would give these very specific things. I mean, he could tell people their address from their hometown and all this stuff. And Edgar Casey, the man himself, he was like, he read the Bible. That's what he went back to. He was
really simple.
Yeah, he kept going back to the Bible. He wasn't this extravagant, esotericist and all this stuff. So some of the things that he's talking about in this very detailed way, there's no like physical way that he's getting this information. And I would say thousands of his readings demonstrate that he had access to exact specific information. And there's never been an argument that really has like refuted that yet. So he is a fantastic study. And it's like, think about it. We live closer to Edgar Casey than, like a lot of the early Christian, the early Christian father heroes lived to Jesus when they were really formalizing like the Christian worldview. So it's like, just the prophet is a prophet everywhere but his neighborhood kind of thing with Edgar Casey. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no. Abbas, do you have anything to add to the occult methods of viewing Atlantis and Casey and whatnot?
Occult methods. Well, it was interesting, Colin, what you were saying earlier on about sort of this Atlantean sort of historical sort of perspective. Isn't that similar to ancient apocalypse? Sort of the premise of that, was it Graham Hancock? Isn't that kind of the same idea?
Well, I think he's been focusing primarily on, like, he did a lot on the comet research. So he wanted to establish that, there is this multi-continental cataclysm that happened at the end of the Ice Age, right? And I would say that regardless of whether or not we know the exact source of that, something did happen. There was this cataclysmic thing. I think him and Randall Carlson have established that, at least that much. And then on top of that, I think Graham's done some good research as far as digging into some of the myths that may or may not relate to this. But if there were myths to be found that related to Atlantis, like, yes, he's getting in. He is getting into those, and he is making a good argument for how that kind of that memory would last. And the Egyptians were looking back to thousands of years earlier, and they did. It seems like they held on to this idea that they were not brand new, and I think Hancock has fleshed that out as well. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, I guess it really depends. Like for me, my own view on the matter of recalling past lives. I of course, yeah, that's a very Pythagorean tenet as well, and I have no doubt that is possible. I'm always I always have to take a skeptical lens though when people, been reincarnated as like, their last life was Napoleon or Alexander the Great, right? Of course, everybody wants to be that. I've yet to meet someone who's like a washerwoman or like, a slave. Yeah, but of course there's a lot of that now as well. So I'm sure a lot of people are investigating those things in their own experiences. But I tend to think of Atlantis in the way that sort of, I suppose, some of the mystics would think about like the Orient, and the Orient in sort of some of the Ismaili and the Islamic sort of esotericism, this idea of the Orient as an imaginal space. Not to say that it's only exists in the imagination or that it's only something that, is through some sort of fantasy, but in an actual physical location, more in the sense of, to be more specific, more as a place, a space by which you can encounter like theophanies, you can encounter other beings, other cities. And I think Hurkalia is one of the places that's mentioned as this type of, mundus imaginalis, this imaginary realm. And I kind of see, I'm not sure about the historical antecedents. I have not enough to go on to make an assertion either way. But I in my mind, I see this Atlantean myth as evoking a particular space that perhaps exists and still continues to exist, and that we can somehow access through a particular state of being. So I think mine is more ethereal, perhaps, maybe not quite as concrete as a historical basis, but something that's still there. By which we can commune. So
that's interesting. So it's kind of like an interior temple, or the temple in the clouds. Was it Carl von Eckarthausen in his book? What is it? Is it actually called the Temple in the Clouds? But it's this interior church. It's almost like Atlantis is this place in the ether that we can still connect to and get the Atlantean initiates to speak to us. Atlantis can still speak to us, sort of in this. So I'm kind of connecting it then to traditions kind of like Rosicrucianism, where there's secret chiefs kind of in the astral plane that would still guide us in a way. Atlantis is almost like that in a sense. Is that what we're kind of going for?
Yeah, I would say so. And Hurkalia, for example, as some analogy, I would say is like it is a place that gives, that's almost the essence of the world that we inhabit today. So in a way, it's like it's interfused with the world, the material world that we inhabit. It's just a spiritualization of it. So it's still occupying the same space in a way as the world that we inhabit, but it's somehow abstracted and elevated and somehow suffuses everything that we experience. So, you know, when something is imagined, it's immediately produced in that world. And I think partly, I think what I find kind of disturbing about this idea is also the idea that perhaps what we're doing is, when we are going into an imaginative state, when we are fantasizing, when we are creating, we're actually embodying things from another world into this one. And even though just a moment ago I said, like, of course, that there was like an interweaving between the two worlds, there's still that sort of ontological distinction. But we always have to be wary of what it is we're bringing in and the effects of that. And I find this kind of leads into this notion between sort of artistry and sort of the creative arts and movies and film, and somehow we reproduce those things. And I always wonder, what's the causative factor there? Is it that we're now creating a world that looks like what's that film with Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling? Yeah, it's like, how much of it was it kind of like prefiguring and like predicting where we would be using the imagination, and how much of it is our current imagination is focused on what we've seen and we're now recreating it. But in either way you look at it, it's coming to life in one manner or another. And I think that interaction, looking kind of like in the mirror, but it reflects from both ends. So I see it in like an embodying of another world. And I think there's an Egyptian element to that as well. So to me, Atlantis kind of embodies that same principle of a two world that's interfused with one another, simultaneously existing, but on different ontological levels. But of course, like you know, Colin, there's a lot of evidence that there are civilizations that sort of predate the ones that we think are the most Ur civilizations. So
yes,
yeah,
yeah, it's like, as far as the Atlantean hope goes, if we can unearth more evidence of some kind of advanced past connected to the all the ancient civilizations we know and love, I think that kind of ballasts the general overview kind of argument, as far as we've been around a little bit longer than we thought. And if we can determine, so moving beyond the Atlantis things, I think the main principles is like, if we can determine that there was some degree of an advanced civilization, like, I mean, if there was some kind of ancient Rome during the Ice Age, even that would qualify to me as like a very startling discovery. And there would have to be some story of decline there, right? So if you take the political narrative of Plato's Atlantis, that kind of is timeless too. And I think that that speaks to that kind of interaction with the present and the past. If you're in a civilization that's increasingly degenerate and is on in the descent in one way or another, while simultaneously there's some group holding on to this kind of, it's like the Black Magicians versus the the White Brotherhood, or whichever thing you want to do. Yeah, it tells this sort of timeless story of tyranny and civilizational collapse getting spread, a kind of maritime empire spreading out. It's America, a maritime empire spreading out a little too much, spending everybody's money, creating wars where they don't need to happen. And there's this retribution. There's this natural retribution from the gods, and only sort of whispers end up surviving about it. So that in and of itself, if you just want to look at that political narrative, that in and of itself, take away the historical stuff, that's also a fascinating layer to Atlantis, is the civilizational collapse.
Can I actually ask something, Abbas? What you were mentioning there when you talked about the imaginal and how what we imagine we create, because that struck me as something interesting. If we're going to talk philosophically about aesthetics, is the whole idea of kind of vision and the, what would you call it, the visionary horizon of a nation. Because I've been thinking about this thing of like, a Hermetic civilization or something, or a Gnostic civilization. But then when like looking at civilizations, it seems they can only exist if they have a narrative. And it's like, I'm just going to like fumble through this question, but you said something really important. It's like, there's this, when we create, how should I put this? Is it like the poet is the most important person? Like for the Rome was kind of going off its rockers and Augustus redeemed it, but not just did Augustus redeem it and make it an empire, but what did he do? The first thing he did is he got Virgil to make the Enneads, or the Aeneid. And it's like that story almost creates like a linchpin that allows like the culture to begin like imagining. And once again, it's about their past. Their past then gives them roots and they're able to imagine a future. And it's like in our time, we like what you're saying, like Blade Runner, it's like we've lost so much of our past. We want to almost like destroy what came before us, like get rid of everything. And it's like with all of the visions we have of the future suck, but even like just normal media, like the friggin' fantasy shows nowadays, it's all kind of crap. Everyone's kind of going back to remember the 80s. All the movies in the 80s were the best. And it's like that's at this time where we still had kind of vision. And it's almost like the poets, the artists, they all used to receive something from the internal world, and that would kind of spread out and give this vision and allow our nations to have this horizon. But now we don't have a horizon. There's nothing in the future but darkness, because we've lost this. We've eaten too much. We've eaten too much on, what would you call it, the dark kind of negative art, negative aesthetic, and we don't have this connection to the past. And we don't have this connection to art anymore. Anyway, I fumbled through that question. Can you make something of that? Abbas?
Well, no, I absolutely, I see it exactly the way you described it, but I think it's also important to realize that even this decline that we're experiencing and sort of we're very much feeling is also part of that story. It's part of that mythos that's been set up. So I think you're right. We've kind of dissociated ourselves. We've cut ourselves off from the tradition, sort of the whatever the founding fathers would have a particular view of, the destiny of America, or any sort of country would have its own mythos. And of course, I think over time, it's a natural process of organisms. And if you see myth as something that continually allows, it needs vitality. It needs that movement. It needs that recreative and drive. It needs that energy. And otherwise it gets stale. You can't just keep telling the same stories. And even in any sort of civilization, it cannot endure the test of time and the eroding of time if it doesn't recreate and renew its tradition. So this idea, for example, the idea of the capital T tradition, it's not a tradition that has necessarily a distinct set of criteria and assertions. It's something that's organic. It constantly renews itself. It constantly has to die, destroy itself, and then give birth to itself again. And you see any sort of ancient civilization, whether it's the Egyptian or the ancient Greek, you realize that there is no core. There's obviously certain core tenets, but the tradition doesn't remain static. Otherwise, it will die. It has to mold and conform to the play of reality, which is neither here nor there. It's always one and the other. And it has to be because it's alive. It has to have the same and it has to have the different. And nothing can survive. Nothing that's living nothing that's alive can exist without having the same and the different simultaneously. the being and the becoming. And I think we are in a stage where I think we have so many stories, so many mythologies, but we don't have that unitive principle. And I think it's different than making something necessarily universal. I think that helps in a certain level, but I think that should be grounded in particular traditions. Now, of course, when you're working with empires and you're working with huge scale, like massive scale of populations and cultures, it becomes more tenuous and much more difficult. So you do need some sort of mythos to keep things from falling apart and disintegrating into tiny fragments. But I think the work has to come from below sometimes in order to feed the top. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly. I feel like
digging.
No, it is a chthonic digging, and that's why all lawgivers were expected to do that katabasis. They went down to the depths, and the laws were given to them, and then they reemerged to the sunlight, and they gave it to the people, right? So there is that element of chthonic renewal that you need to descend to die in order to come back with the vitality of something new that will reinvigorate the society that you're living in. And I think that's kind of what we're all doing in a way, like the three of us. I think we're digging the depths. We're looking not only historically or philosophically, we're looking deep within our own souls. And by that, we're unearthing, we're unearthing sort of that Plutos, right? The Roman god of the underworld, right? Plutos means wealth. And that's where all of this stuff resides, where all the rejuvenating powers, the key to that everlastingness will arise through the depths. And that's fundamentally, that process.
Yeah, if only I mean, there's just so much. There's so much back there. There's so much in the literature, and there's so many great developments. And I mean, I've come across so many figures that not too many people know about, that I had never heard of, and they develop. They're these huge magnum opus. They develop on so many different ideas, and they're extremely well educated. You can tell they probably spent years and years on these projects, and then they just sort of sit around. And there's not, I believe there's not enough people digging back into these old ideas and unearthing that wealth that is still there. And I understand that it takes proper contextualization, and you don't want to flatten these particular traditions or force them into something that doesn't fit. So it's enough to try to observe each and every one of these isolated movements and these figures that were going against the grain and sort of fighting against like the orthodoxy. It's enough to just observe that those have been going on, forever. And then we need to do it again right now. I mean, it's like we need to merge parapsychology with religious studies already, because, and this is the kind of, the gentlemanly battle that I am willing to wage and willing to actually debate about in a very civil manner, of course. But I think a lot of religious scholars and religious studies, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're already approaching these subjects from that kind of, that skeptical sort of smirking in the background attitude. If the individual doing the research, isn't at least open-minded to the idea that, for instance, consciousness might survive the death of the physical body, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then that is going to flavor their interpretations and ultimately the conclusions that they give at the end of their studies. And it always does. There's always this dismissal, that's going on. And then there's those people that are fighting against it a little bit. Camille Flammarion, Chevalier Ramsey, all these different figures that were saying, like, we need to combine the phenomena of the present with all of these studies, because we can see that, if the atheist down the road that didn't grow up in the religious household gets into a terrible car accident, leaves his body and comes back and has a most fantastic, very religious experience and shares that, that is now that is now part of this actual living religious tradition. But hold on, it didn't happen in this religious context. It wasn't mediated by a church or, you know, religious officials or anything like that. It was an experiential origin point of something. You know, so what I'm trying to do at the moment is dig into these experiential origin points, as opposed to looking at everything through a kind of you know, geographic or cultural diffusion that, you know, we don't really know how it originated in the end, even though the person is telling us they had an out of body experience or whatever it is. We don't really know how it happened. It might be just literary fancy, or you know, just a dream, or some poet's imagination, or some poet designing a myth. And I think that has been pushed a little too hard. So now scholars are looking at all the comparisons going on, and they're saying they think that the arguments are weak because there's no physical links. And the idea is that there doesn't have to be physical links. There can just be experiential links. So, you know, approaching it like that, there's so many rooms for identifying in neutral language, not taking, you know, Siberian shamanism and bringing it over to the Greeks, because there's not that relationship there. But, you know, exploring where these actual universals happen in the experiences, and then you can see that those experiences did shape these particular religious traditions, right? So there's so much to be unearthed there, and I don't see it happening. All right, I don't see it happening. So I'm excited to just keep that going.
Because can I just ask something there? You said something about combining parapsychology with religious studies. Because I've been thinking about stuff like that as well. And when I look at that, I go, would that destroy the religious institutions? Because here's the thing. One guy was pointing out recently, he was wondering why Christianity doesn't have its own version of like Qigong. Why doesn't it have that? And there was one kind of point that a guy made was it has to be done via grace in that tradition, because if you allow for technique, then the techniques can just be taught and disseminated, and they don't have to rely on the institution. And that's this interesting thing in the East. There, you know, Taoism, that maybe there's some patriarchs, and same with Buddhism, but there was never a pope. The Dalai Lama came to power as part of the Gelug tradition in Tibet, but he's not the pope of all Buddhists everywhere. And so with Christianity, because it kind of gained I shouldn't say Christianity, I should say with the church, because it gained a dominion, it's almost like the techniques became antithetical. And so even though you can kind of find these traces of these weird internal Christian chakra systems, these weird systems of prayer, sometimes you even find some body movements in some like monasteries, but that's just it. It's sealed away in the monasteries. And it's, if you actually combined parapsychological research into religious studies, I feel like that's the thing that the institutions have been fighting against for like years, for hundreds, if not thousands of years now. And I wonder how that would go.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a couple different examples. Like if you look into the so-called levitating saints and whatnot, you know, there are like letters that still exist and documents that still exist to try to see how the church was going to deal with these apparently really fantastic things going on. But a more grounded story is I'm forgetting the Greek island, but I told this in the dream essay. Corino, I forget the island, but there was this during the 1800s. There was this village in a particular Greek island. They were children were having dreams of the Virgin Mary appearing and telling them where to dig to find these icons. And long story short, these digs eventually did happen, and they found icons of the Virgin Mary, you know, in these hills, and they were buried during the iconoclastic period. In one case, an Egyptian family was leaving religious persecution, and then they came and buried their icons, you know, in this hill. And it took dream sort of premonitory or prophetic or psychic dreams, parapsychological category, right? It took that to unearth these icons, and there was this interaction with a Virgin Mary-esque figure. So that is where the living tradition and the parapsychology intersect. And though there was initial resistance among the clergy and so forth, they eventually did have to renege all of that and just simply accept that, okay, this phenomena actually happened. And, now there's modern processions, at the site where they house these icons. So that's an example of how, like, these experiences happen, then they're verified, and then they're finally pushed through the resistance, and then they have this established place. So, but if we can say that, okay, that means that, the parapsychological element has its place in the living tradition, right? Through these examples, then we can emphasize a little bit more, and we can allow, we can give space for it. We can say we're open to that now, right? And sure, treat it with a little bit of methodology and qualification, but it needs, there's room for it.
And I agree, 100% agree. I think it's exactly like what we were talking about earlier as well. It's the experience. So you have the tradition, you have sort of the rituals, but if they're not grounded and renewed by sort of experiential sort of work, then it will just solidify, ossify, and die. And it's precisely that embodied mode of perception that allows the tradition itself to develop, make little changes, adjustments, tweaks, depending on experientially what its members are undergoing and continually undergoing. So yeah, absolutely. It goes to show this almost like a biofeedback loop, right? Where the health of both the person, the human being, the individual is allowed to broach those territories that are just on the outskirts of the tradition or what would be considered normal or acceptable. And it's only then those like venturesome people or people who are pulled into something else that they bring in that a bit of that energy and that divinity that renews some of those rituals as well. So yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Now, speaking on traditions, I did want to ask both you guys, because us three, we all have a love of that. What would you call it? The three main traditions: the Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Neoplatonism. I know we're all universalists at heart, but I see a lot of people online when they talk about these traditions. They're like, Gnosticism and Neoplatonism, completely different. And because, dualism, demiurgs, Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, different. And they always want to make these strict categories. And I understand that, and I understand that they are distinct things, but they interpenetrate in one place, which I think is the most important place. And it's also I'm on a crusade against people who are like Gnostics, dualists, they just like demiurge, right? The thing that makes, what would you call it, a school Gnostic, in my opinion, is in the word itself. It's the gnosis. The soteriological function of a Gnostic tradition is gaining of knowledge. So in Christianity, it's pistis, it's faith, it's belief, it's the Christ. You have the Christ and he redeems you. That's the soteriological function, the thing that the mechanic of salvation is the Christ. Whereas in a Gnostic tradition, it's the gaining of knowledge. Knowledge does something that engages the mechanism of salvation. And I personally see this in Hermeticism and Neoplatonism. And in my mind, they're not the same thing, but there's this interconnection of that. And it's hard because whenever I say this, people go like, oh, so you think you can just become enlightened by reading books? And it's like, no. Wrong kind of knowledge, wrong kind of gnosis. And there's this distinction that I have to continuously keep kind of making between, you gain knowledge data through your senses. You can deduce certain things about the world using rational methods with your mind. But there's this secret third thing. It's not the senses, it's not the reason, but a secret third illumination. That is the direct knowledge. That is that type of knowledge that enters into you actually transforms you. I have more to say, but like, I'll pass it over to you guys. What do you make of that? What's your theory of knowledge?
Well, at least to touch on the, what we can glean from the Hermetic school, what is clear to me is the students in this school were being trained in order to have experiences, not just to systemize knowledge, or just to learn these fantastic things. And there's some concrete examples where, at least in two places, where there's this visualization technique that's prescribed, if you will. And it's sort of the idea of trying to understand the universal mind with your own mind. And imagine yourself at the bottom of the sea, at the top of the cloud, in the most intricate and in the most expanded viewpoints. And he goes on in this visualization, and it's kind of a way for the individual to experience in this very accessible way their connection with the universal mind directly, immediately, in that moment. It doesn't necessarily require like all of these steps. It is actually a very simple way to play with consciousness in a way that demonstrates that it is phenomenal. And all of a sudden things might come through in those experiences that demonstrate that you are not, physical ego mind is not the source of the visualization that's coming through, at least not in any explainable way. The only explainable terms we have for this now are like unconscious, subconscious, etc. However, if you're thinking that it has to enter the unconscious through the experience of my individual life, through some history and things like that, I don't necessarily think that that's the case. It's that more collective level, right? It's like, if you're sleep deprived a little bit, your mind will do very bizarre things. And there would be this overlapping of images and all of this other stuff. But to bring it back around, at least in the Hermetic school, it's clear that there were initiates being trained to have experiences. I would personally argue that there was out-of-body experiences, in there as well. I tend to sort of side on the idea that the poemandries began with that, even though it's a little ambiguous, because it seems like he's sleeping, he's going to sleep and whatnot. But he uses sleep differently. At least I'm an English translation, so I might be losing something here. But sleep is used differently in the beginning than it is later on in the poemandries, so it implies there's something different there. But yes, that's a direct experiential. It's accessible through the individuals, and this is what I believe Christianity lost. It might not have ever had it, right? But I would, in my personal, I would hope that the one of the real messages there was that individuals can become like Christ and actually have these experiences. So we're talking about the lack of a physical exercise in the Christian doctrine. Well, on the other hand, you have individuals going out into the wilderness, going out and fasting in the desert, and going out solo, not mediated by the clergy or anything or some hierarchy, but going out as an individual and having an experience and directly talking to God, and then coming back, and that there's that change there. So at least in that sense, what I talk about this a lot, especially with my brother, because that's what's lacking for him in modern Christianity. Is there's no emphasis on the health of the body. There's no emphasis on that connection with nature and going out into the wilderness. When you're struggling and like finding that solution, just direct there with nature and with God. So, there's hints of this in the Christian worldview. I would like to believe that was the message all along, but I'm not so sure that it was.
Interesting. Oh, you want to say something, Abbas?
I was just going to try to answer your question regarding knowledge and gnosis, but I 100% agree. Of course, gnosis is it's a specific type of knowledge, isn't it? It's a transformative knowledge. It's not like discursive reasoning. It's not knowledge of something as like, a subject, and then the knowledge is an object by which you can possess it in some way. It kind of collapses those two categories. So knowing the thing knowing and being are the same in this regard. There's an element in which we can go into Parmenides' poem, but the idea that the logos and the being have a very close relationship. So I think and Iamblichus even himself speaks of the emphutos logos, which is like this innate gnosis that we all possess, as opposed to something externalized, right? So, speaking to Colin's point, like a lot of these things were actual embodied experiences. These were actual physical practices in these hermetic, I don't know if we want to call them schools or communities or whatever the case might be there, but it wasn't just simply intellectualizing and theorizing. In fact, it was, in many instances, it was in quite the opposite. There's there's elements of cosmology and astrology in their Hermetic writings, but there's, if you read it closely and in depth, you realize scattered throughout it is an implicit, there's a lot of intimations of like real physical techniques and physical experiences that are being undergone between the teacher, the father, and their son or their pupil. So and I think that's something that's also been sort of in the scholarly literature in the 20th century. There's been so much of focus on sort of the philosophical or sort of the cosmological emphases of the Hermetica, but without real much regard for the actual ritualistic and embodied practices that they were undergoing.
Because that's what you said there about, what is it, knowledge and being. That's exactly when I'm trying to explain to people. I'll say, like, I'll use an example. I'll be like, someone who watches 1,000 boxing matches, do they know how to box? Right. Versus like the guy who trains, or it's like, a guy reads like 1,000 books on how to fly a plane. He reads the entire instruction manual. He even researches the history of the plane and like this specific plane and how its engine is made, but he's never actually sat in the cockpit. Versus, some kid who gets his uncle to teach him how to fly a biplane or something. It's like, which one knows how to fly the plane? It's like, there's this thing about, it's almost like the knowledge I'm trying to connect to is a knowledge that has it's conflated with a concept of skill. Like when people learn to play the piano, they say it's like you learn it in 4 stages. At first you're bad and you don't even realize why you're bad. And then eventually it's like, oh yeah, next it's like you realize what you're doing wrong, but you're still bad. And then the 3rd stage is, now it's like you're good, but you have to concentrate. You know what to do and you can apply it. And if you concentrate and you're playing, you can't do any of that, like you turn your back or you look around or you sing while you play the piano. It's like, no, you have to concentrate while you play. And then the 4th level is this level where it's become embodied. And you can just play the song. You can start it in the middle. You can play it backwards. You can turn and like look at someone, like speak them and talk to them while you're like playing the piano. That's when the knowledge of playing the piano has become embodied and knowing and being become one. And that's something you can't be like, oh, you want to learn how to play the piano? Here, it's not an object you can give to someone. Like, in this, we talk right now, we're all talking about hermetics and everyone chats like, this is interesting, but it's like, we can't like give them our experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, it's this kind of knowledge. And that does something, I think, that actually transforms being itself. And it's like, yeah, there's just something particular about that. It's something particular about that. And what initiates that process? What do we have to learn then? Because surely playing the piano isn't what we need to do to get to the monad, or is it? Or are there are there different little arts? Like, as martial arts, it's to do with the body. And I mean, even in some martial schools, they end up, playing an instrument, or like the samurai who gets into calligraphy. It's some kind of other art which allows them to kind of sink in and pulls them into this other state, which then allows them to get this other kind of knowledge. Anyway, these are just my thoughts.
No, I like that. I like that. I mean, in multiple places, you see the instructor, the teacher, actually saying like, "Pay attention to my words right now," and there's this emphatic there's this emphasis on now attention, like pay attention, listen, and be like you have to have a particular mode of awareness that these things are not done half-assedly. They're not, they're not done with distraction, and it takes a certain level of that attention in order to hold sort of that space where some revelation can emerge. And that's not even just on the part of the pupil, but even the teacher himself is also having to channel a lot of those energies that are coming from the other world through themselves towards the pupil. And so there's this exchange of some sort of divinatory, light, or something happens, and that's indescribable. Like you said, it's something that cannot be articulated, in something, it's nothing that could be taught. And even the instructor himself is sometimes at odds to even describe what to do next or how to do it. It's something that the pupil has to bring with them, either through their own natural propensities and their own disposition but also maybe the prior work that they had done prior to meeting with the teacher. So again, like you're saying, these are incommunicable. This is something that can't be taught, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's become so alluring, but it's become also so difficult to uphold as like a religious school, perhaps. It's not something that you can assert as true. This is something that has to be experienced, and yeah, that's much more difficult to breach.
I think this relates to the Taoist Taoist non-action concept, and it's not that the individual isn't taking an action or doing something physical. It's that it's this natural thing, and the action itself is graceful, and you're taking this action that is very natural, and it's like it's borderline involuntary. It feels like a part of you already. So it's like the individual who was born to be a musician, the individual who just, you ask them, when did what was your first interest? They just already knew that they were going to be a writer, right? There's like, so I think that is I think what, let's say, if there is a religious practice that's developed outside of traditions, which is inevitable for America right now, there should be a focus on like what you can bring to the table that no one else can, and that's not because it's for everyone else's profit or anything. It's that there's something innate, at least I believe, I'm an optimist in this regard. There's something innate in you, totally natural to you, something that you're excited about, that if you allow that to exist, that is actually a service. That's a service to everybody else. It's a service to the divine. And if you keep following your heart in that direction, that is an actual personal religious practice that cannot be prescribed. It cannot be learned in a book or anything like this. It is totally internal, and from the inside it comes out. And it's a part of self-discovery, and then suddenly you feel yourself vanish into it, and then the knowledge and being becomes one. It's like Hermes as the god of eloquent discourse and everything, right? So you can get into these discussions where you start to take this back seat, and there's just this flow state that comes, and the words are coming out, the information's coming out. You don't even know how you're accessing it. That is also, I think, related to this.
And I liked your idea about I liked when you're making reference to service, because therapy, that translates as service. And so everything that we're doing is a healing of sorts. Everything that you just described is a form of healing as well. And so I think, again, it kind of goes back to that idea that what we're doing, I'm not sure if I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but like really all of these practices in one form or another is a healing of the soul. the cura animarum. There is something there that when we are giving service to our fellow citizens, fellow friends, family, the gods. This is a form of therapy itself, and and that establishment of that bond between each one is that healing force. So yeah, absolutely, I like what you said there, Colin.
Yeah, it's a part of developing this conversation with, let's just call it nature, right? That something feels if something feels intrinsically natural to you, and that action contains more genuine excitement than any other action, that is the action that you should take just according to this natural. It doesn't require language, it doesn't require training. It is totally innate to the heart, and it is almost autonomously wants to express itself, and you get to become its vehicle. It's like when artists and musicians, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I woke up and there was this fantastic idea for a song, or a fantastic idea for a book. Even the Darwin had a counterpart that had the same evolutional theory, and they literally brought their evolutional theory, I think, to the same, I might be getting it wrong, but to the same publisher within a matter of days of one another. I forget the other gentleman's name, but totally true story. So it's the idea that there are ideas that kind of have a life of their own, and they can find their proper representatives, right? So like, I'm a novelist as well, and I've had these occasions where like the idea is so clear and it's just pouring onto the page, and then there comes this moment and it's like the spirit of it is gone, and there's like you're like, where is it? Is it something that I did? Is there? And it is bizarre when it happens, but the excitement has now turned into such a different degree that it's like it's no longer feasible to go back to this other thing. Maybe it's getting served out through a different individual. So yeah,
Sounds like you have a fickle muse, Colin.
who knows what it is?
That's
They are demanding occasionally.
But it is interesting. It's like sometimes you could be in the shower and you've been like struggling all day with just that one piece that you need to fit the puzzle of writing, or you're developing a story or something, and then it hits you. It just comes out from without, and it's such a bizarre experience, but like it's so appropriate. It's so fitting. It literally feels right, and there's no words really to describe sort of that sense of joyousness that comes about when that little piece just is given to you, and that is the muse. Absolutely.
Because it's interesting what Colin was talking about at one point. It sounded like he was talking about almost like the inbuilt tendency. Because I have this concept from I kind of get it from Dion Fortune talks about it, and I found it also in Evol, and to a degree Gurdjieff talks about it as well. Is people have tendencies on the path. And there's technically three, but the two main tendencies is like, one is the ascetic and the other is the mystic. And the ascetic is about kind of bracketing the world. So there's just nothing. It's like you bracket out your thoughts, your feelings, all of your compulsions, your bodily impulses. And it's just like you just concentrate on the candle, you just concentrate on the breath, or you just concentrate on spatial awareness, the consciousness in and of itself. And it's like you bracket the world away until it's just you kind of standing there. And then when there's nothing else, it's all of a sudden something snaps and there is a communication with divinity. And it's like, that's the path of the ascetic. The other path, the mystic, is the exact opposite. Instead of, well, there may be a moving away from the world, but instead of falling into silence, they go into chattering, into prayer, continuous prayer, this continuous movement of almost like chanting, this continuous praise, or this as they say in the cloud of unknowing, continuous thrusts of love into the cloud of unknowing. And when they connect with divinity through their continuous activity, then there's this silence, this repose. And it's like the two paths are kind of flipped in a way. It's very interesting, but is one path better than the other? No, what path should you choose? And it's almost like, what path should you choose? You have an inbuilt tendency. And it's like, this is something I think some people kind of mistake. And it's like, they see the path of the mystic, or if they're on the path of the mystic, they see that as the only way. And it's like, oh, no, don't do any of this other stuff. Or the more ascetic philosophical path, it can be like, oh, don't, be like this. But it's like, no. It's, you have this tendency within you, and you can learn, each of the paths can learn from each other. But it's like, I'm more of an ascetic. If I tried to be a mystic, I would feel fake. It just wouldn't work. I can't do a Thomas A. Kempis. I just can't, guys. I can't do it. But I can totally try a Yogananda. I can totally try, go introspecting. That's kind of more my inbuilt tendency. That almost like is natural, is what I find natural in that way. Kind of like a call to what you're saying, Colin.
Yes, this is what is discarded when you get into these kind of one story fits everyone prescriptions. Whenever you're in, this even goes with like trying to find the whatever religious association that seems to speak to you more. But yeah, you can't prescribe the same techniques and everything to every individual, especially if these things are kind of, as Abbas was mentioning, sort of fossilized in the past, or they seem sort of frozen in time, and you're trying to harken back to these other systems in faraway places and faraway times, and just force yourself into them. Whereas there's always a more natural inclination that I do think it presides in every individual, and it's a responsibility for every individual to converse with this thing that's within them, and listen to it. And if you can take the smallest action, listen to it, take the smallest action forward, the conversation deepens. And whatever the it is, let's just say it's our guiding spirit, right? Our tutelary daimon, if you will. That once that establishes a firm link of communication with you, it realizes that now we have more opportunities to do more. We can go in new directions, and then growth begins. And then you're really actually walking the path. Does that path need to comport with one or another school or one or another exotic worldview or something like this? It doesn't. It's going to feel entirely natural to the individual. That's the conversation that, especially in America right now, with all the identity crises that are going on, probably all around the world, that conversation needs to happen.
Indeed, I just saw this question here. What is it? Kind of similar to what we were speaking, so I brought it up. It's question: Evola speaks of the saintly path, which I'm assuming is the mystic, or even ceremonial magic path. I don't know. They seem a little bit too different. But I guess Trithemius was both a saint and an occultist, saying that it is almost an incomplete initiation due to the separation of God from the self. So he's saying that path is incomplete form of initiation because of the separation of God to the self. I don't know. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I'm like, I don't know, Louis. I think the saintly, but the thing about what I was also mentioning just then, how I see it as well, is ascetic and mystic. There's also a bottom-up path and a top-down path. The bottom-up paths are paths that are like systematized. There's something where it's like they take it from the perspective of the human, and it's like you're storming heaven, not necessarily left-hand path, but it's like you do this practice, you get this result, and then your master gives you this next practice, and you do this, and and it's like this bottom-up building up. And you're moving upwards. You're going through processes. But then there's this other path where there may be processes, but it's more about cultivating qualities, and it's this very mystic, receptive, you do nothing. God does the work. You're a kind of a mystic, and you look up, and something from above reaches down and pulls you along the path. Those are the two, the top down and the bottom up are the two kind of methods. And I feel like the Christianity is top down, And that's why when they in the occult undercurrent in the West, we kind of have this bottom-up approach. And that's where there's these bits missing from all over the place, like Kabbalistic systems just kind of missing bits here, or alchemy, we kind of don't know everything, or you have to kind of fill in a gap with grace, so to speak. That seems to be like the bottom up is almost like a musical, what do you call the musical, do re mi fa sol la ti, but it's like there's a missing semitone that needs to be filled with grace. So even the bottom up ones kind of need a little bit of help in the West, at least. But that's how I'd kind of answer that question. I don't know if any of you guys want to add anything to Aluya 471's question.
Well, to your point, Richard, it's Deo considente, right? It's God. It's really nothing is done. Jung says, like, without the God's help, and so and God willing in a way, right? So there is a sense in which, even in an alchemical situation, even though there are processes, there are procedures that are done to achieve a certain state or to create some sort of tincture, nothing can be accomplished without the right timing, but also without proper prayer, without proper reverence, without proper piety, without proper sort of purifications, and without the sort of the approval and the cooperation with the gods and the angels or the daimons, whichever one you want to use there. So yeah.
I also think that there, it's like we don't necessarily always need to figure out whether or not we should take this path or that. That's all. A lot of that appears to me. It kind of frustrates me a little bit because it always seems to be reaching. You're reaching outside of yourself from something that's kind of far away, and the mind is active. You're overthinking. Your rational systems are all they're kind of deceiving you. In a way, I do think that. Like I'm becoming increasingly apophatic, right? I will learn a bunch of information. I'll take notes on it, and I'll do my best to memorize it, and I will figure out where it fits in what I'm attempting to do, like what is its purpose. And then if I feel that purpose is fulfilled, it's gone. It's sort of gone. And then if you ask me about it, I'm like, I might have to check my notes. Like, but it was there when the spirit was there, but now it's gone. And I don't care. I don't necessarily feel attached to all those little bits of information. And if I believe Iamblichus has some statements, and of course Pseudo Dionysius has these apophatic kind of approaches where when it comes down to these, I mean, let's just say the experience of death, because a lot of philosophy is preparation of death, right? For death. You don't necessarily always, I don't know that you want to, this is my opinion, I don't know that you want to carry all of this baggage of rules and information and all of these systems and all of the memories that's associated with your personality and everything. It's almost like surrendering entirely to the experience. For me is the more, because who am I to say that nature doesn't already have a perfectly functioning system to bring me exactly where I need to go, right? Why should I imagine that my ego and all my powers alone, I'm going to be able to figure out how to pierce the thing and climb the stairs of heaven and everything else? I do think that sure, every individual has their own path, but I do think that we can drop some of these things, some of these apparent rules, because the risk is, if all of a sudden you're designing a new belief, these limitations are now created through your belief systems, right? So if you believe that your connection with the divine is limited in all of these different variety of ways, then that might actually be how it manifests, because the universe, the systems of reality, they seem to work in accord with our belief to some level, right? So the more that you believe in these limiting ideas, If you do believe that they are a limitation and that they're not like, if you're not excited about it, if you don't feel certainty there, if you feel totally uncertain with your limiting beliefs associated with this, they're going to manifest in that way to tell you that, hey, these beliefs are limiting. You can actually drop some of these. So the challenge is realizing that we might not actually have to do as much work as apparently everyone is telling us we have to do. There might be something that's already going on inside of you that you have been ignoring or that you haven't been exploring that can provide that catharsis. You finally sing that song or something, or write that poem, and you're just sobbing alone in the woods, right? I mean, those kind of things happen, and they can't be prescribed by other people. That's kind of my, let's just say, to try to take a contrarian approach there.
No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So you would say, like, there's nothing you would need to build, like an existential body of the being or a body of light. There's no work like that needs to be done. That's just something that's found or activated.
You see, this is
or even that idea is just something that needs to be done.
I'm not. I mean, I think that there is something to it, and I do think that the effort that we take, and like the more graceful and virtuous that we do become, we do bring that with us. So there's no doubt that we can work on these things and bring some level of that into the next the next life. I do believe that there is a degree of that, but I don't think that you should imagine that it's all on you. You're all alone. It's all on you as an individual, that there's no one helping you out. There's no greater forces that are going to lend a hand. See, because we're kind of becoming a little too mental and a little too masculine in that regard. Like, I believe in the embracing unconditional love of the Divine Mother, right? So if you believe in that energy, then, even if you're a terribly flawed human being through one or another reasons, there's still going to be that mercy and that love there, right? Because my particular approach is like, there's free will under certain parameters. I can't just will that my house, transforms into a magical cloud. I can't just there's will under certain limitations, right? That will is carried over at every step. So unless you buy into this kind of, which I very much despise, this kind of Georgianian prison planet sort of situation, I don't think that anyone needs to hear that right now. That if you're going too far down the prison planet road, like that might be a distraction. That might actually be a distraction, and you might be denying the power of divinity to help you out when necessary. So that's my take on it.
You got a Georgiani mention there. Very interesting. Sorry, I just found that funny. Abbas, I think we've got a question here in chat for you, because Aluya again wants to ask, Abbas, how do you spectate pantheons of gods, and also do you see Islamic names of gods in a similar light? I guess he's asking, are Islamic names of gods like different beings, or is there a distinction between your views and, let's say, Ibn Arabi, Rumi, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. Ibn Arabi, his philosophy is very much in line with this idea of the divine names, and during his lifetime, he was accused from both sides, really. Well, he was actually accused of being a pagan, and so the difficulty with that is he was simultaneously kind of attacked on all sides, because this idea is that he's neither technically a monotheist in the proper sense, but neither a polytheist in sort of the more pagan sense. He combines both elements, and in that way, he kind of upset everybody.
This is Ibn Arabi?
This is Ibn Arabi, yeah. And so what happens is, with those divine names, they kind of act as gods in almost like in the sense that every god can be somehow, each divine name can be collapsible, right? Between in a monotheistic, under a monotheistic god, there are almost aspects of that one god with the, you know, with those multiple names. So in that sense, each name is a lord, and you know, each person will, you know, would have their own lord that they would essentially aspire to, and you know, have almost like a theurgic ascent with, a union with that lord. And so in that regard, he can be seen as a polytheist because he's offering a space where these divine names are sort of a panoply of multiple gods. But at the same time, he's still within the tradition of a sort of within Islam, so he can't go too far extreme in that regard. And so he still subsumes it under, you know, a common sort of universal monotheistic Allah. So it's it's both. And so he allows for that tension between the monotheistic and the polytheistic perspective. And I think there's a very good article, I think it's called "The Problems of Monotheism" by Henry Corbin. And it's a little bit of a dense article, but he goes into some of those details of what the issues arising from this view of monotheism that we've inherited, and how some of the Islamic thinkers actually kind of like touched upon some of these other ways of conceptualizing the divine. So yeah, that's an excellent question.
Interesting. Oh, and also, does being bald come with an expertise in esotericism installed? Abbas, everyone wants to know, are you a part of our club?
Yeah, no, I do have hair. I do have my hair. I think my background, I think my people actually invented hair. We have so much of it. But I'll have to attain a state with you, as you gentlemen, by, you know, increasing enough tapas or, you know, heat in my body to just like clear it off completely. I look forward to it. I look forward to it. Not there yet, gentlemen. Not there
You'll
yet.
join us eventually.
Eventually. I'll reach that level of enlightenment. Yeah.
Well, just beware if you don't have a pharaonically shaped skull.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. So you mentioned Giorgiani there. What is it, Colin? I know, what is it? Ages ago, I watched your Abbas's Giorgiani video. Maybe Abbas can refresh us. But what are you guys' takes on Giorgiani, just to go modern?
I want to hear Abbas's first.
Oh, Giorgiani. I mean, you know, I've watched a number of his video, like his YouTube interviews. I haven't admittedly read his books. I don't think they probably differ too much in terms of their content. But you know what? It's entertaining because it feels like a wild ride. You know, when I'm listening to Giorgiani, everything is. I love hearing about conspiracies. I love hearing about sort of the, you know, aliens and, you know, extraterrestrials and secret societies. I think it's a fabulous imagination, but I think personally, you know, some of the things that he says is based on, you know, obviously, like quite a few things are based on historical fact, and he gets some of his ancient history right. But what I take issue with is his creative license. He's building a very nice, fabulous narrative for the modern mentality. That's, what am I saying? I'm not saying post-atheistic, because I think he is an avowed atheist. I don't think he believes, I could be mistaken, but I believe he just uses the gods, he uses mythology as sort of a tool to further his own political, philosophical agenda, to be edgy, to lean into the conspiracy-minded, the paranoid. And I mean, like, these sound very, you know, it sounds pretty harsh. It sounds like I'm being very unfair. But again, he lacks pistis, and Colin will understand as well that there's this idea that, like, he takes the Gnostic characterizations and mischaracterizations from, you know, Christian scholars or Christians themselves, heresiologists, and he kind of like embraces it and kind of goes full gung-ho with it. He kind of like expresses the most cartoonish ideas of the Gnosticism that you and I, and Richard, we reject. This idea of like a pure dualism. The world is a prison. Everything's, the gods are out to get you. Plato's trying to gaslight you into, the noble lie, which is also a weird translation, because I don't know how that thing got caught on, because it's not even, a lot of times it's actually not this, it's not the words, that's not the actual translation of what Plato is referring to. So again, he uses a lot of half-baked ideas, half-baked theories, and he presents it in such a convincing manner that I sometimes have to look at it. Sometimes I pause and I'm like intently looking at his facial expression. I'm like, is there cheekiness behind his eyes? Is he kind of like playing a game, or does he actually like wholeheartedly believe in what he's saying? And from what I gather, I mean, like, it seems like he believes what he's saying. It just, to me, it's so astounding. It's so fantastical, his narrative, that I find it very difficult to take him seriously as a thinker, or like not even as a thinker, even as anyone who has a measure of piety and respect for the gods, who don't see them as evil archons, can't take what he says at face value. And not to say that some of the historical things that he talks about, the Ossetis, he talks about like the Persians and sort of like their influence historically, and all of that is like very much true, but again, it's his interpretations and his putting them all together into this grand narrative of paranoia that I really find very unpleasant.
Well, since Abbas offered the very measured response,
yes,
I might come around with a little bit of a more harsher take here. I distrust Giorgiani like very much. However, I find him, he's a great researcher. He's extremely entertaining. He does unearth fantastic stories and accounts. I'm sure that there's books that he's written that are valuable, and that research that he's done is valuable. But he goes around saying that he's the only philosopher in America, and says it with full conviction. And that just doesn't necessarily like align with the kind of true original philosopher. As Synesius says, a philosopher isn't boisterous. It's like so there's a little bit of that turns me off. And the last thing, struggling Americans looking through the spiritual thing and also conspiracy minded need to hear is that they live in a prison planet run by Nordic overlords, and that your soul is most likely honestly going to get trapped. But there's this secret escape hatch that only I, the only philosopher, actually has the means to give to you. I mean, I have this whole like notes like against Giorgiani. I do this with just to like exercise my mind in that direction. Maybe I have a proclivity to want to debate a little too much, but I think I would be totally civil about it. Would I smoke a cigar in the back room with him and have a good laugh? Yeah, this isn't like cloak and dagger stuff or anything. But I think the prison planet narrative, you're going to get a lot of people that totally buy into that, and then they squint at, Monroe's Far Journeys, and they look at the Loosh thing, already a very abstract and iffy story in there. You're not even entirely sure what's going on in the first place and how they got there. The story's told by a different sort of entity. And it's deliberately called hearsay evidence by Monroe in the book. And he doesn't proceed to go on and like adopt that as his worldview. That what I'm saying is that we're just here to like produce Loosh, and then it's going to be harvested by some, celestial overlords. Monroe didn't like adopt that as his like philosophy going forward and whatnot. And there's all these places in the Explorer tapes and in the Monroe records that totally contradict that. So that's just one example of the squinting at this one place and fitting it into your kind of nihilism, but not really nihilism kind of doctrine there. So yeah, entertaining, great stuff. There's a lot of great research in there. But nonetheless, I don't believe I didn't believe David Icke when he talked about reptilian overlords.
Oh yeah.
And I don't believe Giorgiani when he talks about Nordic overlords. So yeah, more of a casual response there. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I enjoy Giorgiani. I enjoy him. I've done a couple of videos.
So tell me, Richard, what is it particularly that you clearly Colin and I are not huge fans of him, but what is it that appeals to you?
So actually, well, so what you said is like, I mean, he does make some choices where I'm like, oh, cringe, dog. Why did you have to do that? Like the whole Satanism thing. Like he just needs to call himself a Gnostic Luciferian. Like that's what you are. That's what you are. Just say Gnostic Luciferian. Don't be like, I'm a Satanist. Okay, cool. But like, no, I just randomly, the first time I saw him I was randomly ages ago trying to look up and find out some stuff on Heidegger. And he was one of the only videos on YouTube with a guy talking about Heidegger. And I was like, oh, who's this guy? And this was like back when he only had like 12 interviews or something, so I could just binge watch them all. And so it's just here's the thing. It's like when you just watch one and he's just given that, you don't see any of the crazy stuff. And so that Nordic overlord stuff was like a slow drip for like the early Giorgiani kind of people who were aware of Giorgiani. He slow dripped that over like kind of years, and then all of a sudden just went like full throttle into it. So when I first kind of saw him, I was like, oh, it was, this kind of, he's on Jeffrey Mishlove. He seems to be an intellectual person, and I was always looking for people who were, had certain smarts and were engaged in the world in a certain way. Like, they're a philosopher, they're a politician, but they were also esoteric. That's what kind of appealed to me. Like, how do people, because to me, at that point in time, I was always like, how do people integrate the esoteric and the normal? And it's like, you either just have normies or people who are completely schizo and they have no grounding whatsoever, which is ironic now looking at Giorgiani. But it's like, so at the time when I kind of first saw him, it's like, he only had that one book out, Prometheus and Atlas, which genuinely, it's a good aggregate of parapsychological information. Like parapsychology, you can look up Dr. Ian Stevenson, but then that's only on reincarnation. You can look up stuff on Dean Radin and his work with telekinesis, but then it will only be on telekinesis or telepathy or things like that. Whereas having a book that's just a massive aggregate, and I don't know about being the only philosopher, but he is a genuine philosopher. And so when he kind of has all of this backbone and he's talking about parapsychological evidence, and then he's in the same chapter, he's talking about Hegel and Schelling and Kant and how this parapsychological kind of experiment violates, Kant. It's all very good. It was fascinating stuff. And then space Nazi Atlantean time traveling Nordics. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, and don't forget that we're basically going to be in a nuclear like Holocaust or whatever by 2050.
Right. The one that really gets me is his most recent one is on information theory. Have you heard that one?
Is that with the databases having a certain weight attached to them and then creating a black hole of some sort?
Energy and matter are connected, but you can also put information into a triangle. So information has a weight. So your USB, if you put photos on it, technically gets heavier. You wouldn't be able to tell unless you have a quantum scale or something. But if you got all of the data out of everywhere in the world, all of the servers into one place, it would be about 30 pounds in your hand, which is interesting. But if that grows exponentially, like, if it doubles every single year, 30 pounds, it's only, within 100 years, you'd have something, the scale, the weight of the moon with gravity, was it mass equals also gravitational pull, it will destroy the world. And I'm like, information apocalypse? Nah. I was just like, nah. And so like with a couple of things, I'm just like, I don't kind of follow, but his metaphysics seems to be panpsychic. He seems to be a panpsychist, and he has some interest. I like the parapsychological stuff. I like the concept of the spectral revolution. I'm like, this is fantastic. Oh my god, yes. But then it's just like, yeah, there's all these other hang-ups, and let's not even talk about his geopolitics. But good lord. But yeah, no. But because I've just been reading him and watching him for so long, I'm just like, yeah, he's aight. So it's always funny seeing other people's takes on him.
Yeah, another individual that I would like to actually mention is like all the Aman Hillman, renderings of the story of Jesus, and somehow Jesus is actually this relatively this definitely nefarious character who's taking advantage of children and
Pederast,
stuff.
yeah.
Like I know people personally who otherwise, like, we're on the same page with a lot of things, and I consider them very smart and everything else, and now they've bought into the idea that Jesus was doing things with children, and that Christianity was actually this sort of salve drug cult that was harvesting energy, if you will, from other things. And it's just like, if you're the only person in the world arguing for this very radical thing, you have to get in there and be like, okay, so what, like, where's all of the evidence here, right?
Yeah.
And then there's all this, no one will debate me, and there's a lot of figures that are doing that right now. They stand on the absolute margins, edgelording. No one will debate me.
Well, I don't know if you've maybe both of you have come across this, but I like to term it the maenads of Ammon, because there's this group, like groupies of them. They come on, start to spam you, and maybe Colin, you've come across this. I'm not sure, Richard, you're giving me a quizzical expression here, but
Yes.
they really just, they're very aggressive, and they they're always mentioning the purple juice, and at the moment you mention the color purple, it like triggers something in their minds, and they associate everything.
Thank God we got a purple background going.
Yeah, this must have a cult meetings related. Yeah. But like, it's very strange, and so yeah, they kind of go around, kind of unless it's him in different profiles, kind of like secretly advertising his channel, but they all seem to be completely taken in and obsessed with this sort of character that he's developed, this interesting, perverse. Again, it brings to mind the same idea of Giorgiani, where they take the worst Christian sort of like diatribes and heresies and like accusations against sort of the Gnostics, and they kind of like lean into it and lean into people's prejudices and understandings. Like, to me, everything that he embodies, everything he talks about, even his aesthetic and the way he presents the material, makes it seem like everything in ancient Greece was like not demonic, not in the sense of like the ancient Greek word, but like demonic as in the Christian sense. And he kind of like feeds into this Christian sensibility of the pagan world as somehow incredibly nefarious. And he very much leans into that, and I think he's kind of like tapping into an audience that is rejecting Christianity wholesale, and whatever the opposite of Christianity for them, whether it's Satanism or devil worship or drinking Medea's concoction and doing stuff in the cemetery, like all of this stuff just seems like he's playing up on Christian tropes, and he's just completely taking the side of the opposite of what a nice Protestant boy would consider horrifying, or sinful. So to me, it seems like a game. He's playing a little bit of a game, and he's he's leading people on by their own prejudices and stereotypes. So
I have a confession to make. I have never listened to a single thing on Ammon Hillman. I've heard the name, and then like I think vaguely I look at the videos and the thumbnails, and I'm also stuff to do with psychedelics. I have no interest in whatsoever. So I just kind of, that's a black hole. So when you guys talking, I'm like, damn, what is he talking? What is he saying?
I actually get, like, a full confession here. I get an actual visceral reaction when I try to watch his videos. It's not like, again, like I don't know, how do I say this? Like, if anyone is possessed by a demon,
I was going to say, do you think he's possessed?
I would say, and I'm sure he plays it up. I'm sure he would love, this would probably be great sort of advertisement for his channel. But if anyone is possessed by a demon or pretending that they're possessed by a demon, it would be him. But like, honestly, I do think it's legitimate. I do think he has there are evil forces that are working through his mind. And it sounds like I bought into his presentation and his deception of what he's trying to convey. But I think ultimately we are all inhabited by various powers, energies, gods, demons. And, to me, there's nothing about what he does and says that is pious and has a reverence. And I think, again, it comes back to that sense of piety and reverence. It's like the manner in which you do things is incredibly important. How you do things, what presence of mind you bring to things, it actually changes something from a good act to an evil act. And I don't want to sound like a moralist or like, some strict dualist here. I do see sort of the coloration in between those two extremes. But I think, I don't know, I think there's something off about Hillman. And, it's not something that, to be edgy and encourage and emulate, I don't think is a healthy mode of being.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's actually, I think it's important to talk about because, I mean, I've seen reverential Christians like buy into this totally. And Richard, I know you're kind of wondering still what's going on, but like, I don't even want to mention what he thinks is happening because it might I don't know, it might shut the video off or whatever. I don't know what the deal is, but, yeah, it's nothing too extraordinary. But the sad part is how hard people will buy into it, and then you get these kind of cult followers and stuff. And there's no reverence here. And I also get this very this sense that he doesn't have any kind of good intentions here. What is the end if we realize that Jesus was just this highly perverted individual who was extremely high on drugs during the whole entire gospel? What do we do with that? If that's even true, so there's no, that's not like thought out. That's not something good that you can provide anyone. And, the people that are buying into this are kind of showing their own hand, and they're showing that you haven't actually taken the lessons of all the people in this, in this place that you think you're researching. So yeah,
I'm so glad I haven't wasted my time.
Rejoice.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because it kind of bleeds into this question. We got another question from Aluya here. If anyone else has questions, you can just drop into the chat, guys. So this is maybe a personal question. I apologize in advance. What does prayer play for you, and how do you pray? Meaning, what are your hermeneutics for prayer? How does God or the gods react to prayer? From what I'll just mention, and this is the gods react to prayer, and this is to do with, kind of Giorgiani and maybe Hillman. They kind of have this anti-God thing, but it's I think there's a part in the Vedas where it says the gods are attracted to virtue the same way man is attracted to fire. And so there's something, when I read that, I was like, there's some interplay. There is some reciprocal nature between gods and humans. It's not just the gods and they're all drinking wine on Mount Olympus, and then there's, a human has prayed to us. We'll dangle a little bit of, something to him. He was extra, fervent this time. Oh, it's not like that. It's
connoisseurs of prayer. Connoisseurs of prayer. I like that.
It's actually that there is something that the gods gain. The gods have something to gain, and I almost always like to mention the myth of Cadmus, the myth of Cadmus helping Zeus. It's like when Zeus fights Typhon, he gets Cadmus, this hero, to play the lyre and to put Typhon asleep so that Zeus can then one-shot him with a giant mountain. And I always like that because it's the gods need us. This is Keter and Malkuth. This is the very highest and just the normal mortal teaming up against a kind of a greater evil in a sense. The gods need our help. And so prayer, this reciprocal relationship, is important. How do I pray? Aluya, path of ascetic dog. I don't, but I have respect for people who do. I don't know if you guys want to add anything onto that.
Sure. I think prayer implies that you're already in a constant communication with greater unseen forces that can possibly interact with your life. And a part of it as well is that in the act of prayer, you are in that action, you're sort of confessing to a belief as well. And you're aligning something, and you're focusing directly on something. So other parts of your mind are quieting down. You're sort of you're professing through this action a firm belief in something greater than yourself. So there's that humility. You're humbling yourself before something greater. So there's all of these kind of layers that I would say are, you know, intrinsically virtuous, and they actually do help you establish this connection. And, you know, I would have a different view about prayer if I didn't have times in my life where I prayed in a very, like, not praying to any particular thing. I didn't have any. I just knew that there was something else, and I prayed, and like the prayer was answered in all stretches of the imagination, right? Now, I'm not saying that that happens every time, and I'm certainly not telling you to pray for exact things in some selfish way. Again, these things happened when I did not have any clue what I was doing, you know. But that's also telling of a little bit of this. You know, you can be naive and innocent, and greater forces can come to your aid. You don't have to have developed all of this intellectual rigor behind you. These forces are unconditionally on your side. You know, that's how I approach it. And I think prayer can be extremely simple if that's what works for you. It can also be extremely complicated if that is what works for you. It's all about the state of being that it's sort of getting you into, and the kind of implied belief systems that are being expressed in the act of prayer.
I should just add an addendum to what I said. It's like, it's not that I don't pray, but if there's ever a time where meditation turns into prayer, that's when I pray. But that's what I'll add. On to you, Abbas.
I know. I love that. Everything that you both said is absolutely. I absolutely agree with. It's a communion. It's an establishing a communion between yourself and the God to whom you're praying. Sometimes you can pray to, you know, multiple ones at the same time, but, you know, sometimes it's that one-to-one, that monos pro mono, right? That sense of the one within ourselves, actually in communion with the one of the God that we are praying to. And it's a thanks, it's a confirmation of fidelity, it's an establishment of a bond, of a union, of thanksgiving. It's all of these things. And yeah, it's vitally important in my life. Every day, I would say I pray. And I also sing and recite the sort of Orphic hymns. So to me, prayer is incredibly important. And again, it establishes that relationship with the deity.
That's interesting. With Orphic hymns and barbarous names, Abbas, do you do any of the intoning of like the vowel sounds in your personal practice?
I don't do it on a regular. I wouldn't say it's part of my everyday or, you know, monthly sort of thing. I would say that's more reserved for like a more ritual, an actual more elaborate ritual. I would say something that would involve a lot more time, preparation. I have something coming up in 2026 that I'm going to start preparing for, but it's in those moments that I would start using those utterances. But yeah. But to me, it's very simple. It's very basic. It's nothing fancy when I'm doing my prayer. It's, you know, just giving some offerings and burning incense and, you know, yeah, just trying to be intimate, you know, with the presence around me at the altar. So.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think there's another one. How do left and right hand paths differ in your opinion when it becomes to belief and practice? So this is something I'll say is when you define left-hand path, or what is a left-hand path system, just looking at the left-hand path systems, they're all so completely different that there's nothing that binds them together except for one thing, and that's antinomianism, which is nominalism is the idea that spiritual progress can only be achieved via submission to certain laws or strict codes of morals. So antinomialism is basically the violation of the laws, or a rejection of the laws. And it's like, that's how, in its like very most basic sense. I mean, if you want to go more Western is basically left hand, right hand is basically black and white magic. But in a more Eastern sense, it's almost like right hand path is orthodox temple magic, and left hand path is just any of the guys out in the forest just getting it up with elemental magic or whatever they're doing. That's how I see it personally. What is it? Ab EV2. Thank you for the question there. I don't know how you guys see it. How do you guys see it?
The Pythagorean Y. Have you ever seen that image? It's that illustration. It's like the Y, and on one side it's someone who's like stumbling off, and there's fires, and he's kind of it's like this path of destruction, and then on the other side it's this ascent. He's ascending off the other side of the Y. I like to take that perspective. I mean, I know that there's a lot of like different, left hand, right hand paths and all these different occult schools, and they have their interpretations. But to me, if you just want to look at it from this sort of, the left hand path in the Pythagorean sense is more of this selfish, doing it for selfish concerns and taking a more destructive approach to getting whatever it is you want to get in the end. And it's constantly reinforcing this me above everybody else. Whereas the right hand path is more implicitly, serving people around you, listening to the heart, and there's not as much cunning and these kind of traits that can come in. Now it's like, I do believe in kind of the philosophy of like the dangerous gentleman, be a dangerous gentleman. Don't just be a gentleman. Don't just be dangerous. Be a little bit of both. Combine these. It's like, if someone's coming for me and my family, like I'm gonna put up a fight. I'm not just gonna let you, walk all over me, right? But I'm never going to seek out that kind of conflict. And in low stakes conflicts, you keep your poise and you remain gentlemanly, and you get out calmly and take everybody you need out of the situation. So it's like, that's how I'd like to apply that. I don't think, however, that you can have it, I don't think that you can pretend to be some pious Christian and et cetera, if all of a sudden you're like totally sold on like a war in some foreign area, and there's going to be absolute mayhem and violence and everything else. That is an inherent contradiction. So it's like the left hand and right hand paths it's just sort of a metaphor about the unified duality within all of us, and that evil the beast that is in us needs to be tamed. And if you let it take full ride over your life, there will be destruction, right?
Yeah. Abbas, do you have a take on left-hand paths?
Yeah, it's interesting because every time I think of left hand, right hand, I'm always kind of reminded of the Hindu, sort of the tantric tradition, which would be considered left hand, and the right hand being more like Vedanta. Again, I think like this is maybe my misunderstanding, but I always imagine that whether it's the left hand, like I believe that tantrists would say, like the Shaiva tantrics would say that like we live in a certain stage of the Kali Yuga where the old ways no longer work. So you need something more radical, something more disruptive to attain divinity or to commune with the divine. And so they use techniques that are completely abhorrent to any Hindu. So they would eat meat, they would drink alcohol, and like to us in the West, this sounds like a great idea. Like, whoa, yeah, sounds like full on, what is it? Well, decadence and indulgence. But that's actually the opposite of their own frame of mind, which these are horrifying things to have to endure, because it means you're becoming unclean and you're purposely making yourself unclean. And so I think conflating it a little bit, I think with a sense of left-hand path, I think we have a different understanding in the West in terms of like maybe over like a sort of nefarious, black magic, narcissistic, manipulative aspect, which would be maybe considered our notions of a left-hand path versus more of a virtuous right-hand path. So mine's always a little bit like, to me, these are two paths to the divine, not necessarily, sort of a tradition where you're reverencing Satan as opposed to God or something like that. There's that sense of, I don't know, sort of the ecstasy of evil. I think the intention is a little bit different. I think in the Western occult tradition, there's more of that allure of like the romantic sort of rebellion against tradition, against authority, against morals. And I think that kind of like gets people into this idea that, in order to be, in order to break out of the system, you have to be transgressive and you have to revolt and you have to do. But again, it ends up falling into self-serving narcissism. There's no ecstasy. There is no, and if there is ecstasy, it's a minimal ecstasy. It's a very contained ecstasy. It's not anything relating to the divinities or that sort of ecstasis. So to me, I think it's different. I think the intentions are different regarding sort of the Hindu tradition, which is how I associate left-hand path, versus sort of the modern interpretations of it, which I find sometimes very puerile. They're like very childish, very, at such a, like an adolescent stage where you just want to rebel against your parents. And, not to say that, there isn't room for the rebellion and, constraining of maybe bourgeois values that might be a little bit more, arbitrary or limiting or whatever the case might be. But I think there is a strong romanticism with that Luciferic figure who delve into the darkness and the muck and the shit in order to somehow elevate themselves. But I think even with the Lucifer, I think there's more of a noble quality to it. And even in the Islamic tradition, it was through pride and arrogance. Shy. There was a deep connection between Allah and his angel, right? And it was through the arrogance of not bowing and submitting himself to Adam that you have Iblis becoming, some satanic, rebellious figure. So again, I don't know. I think, to me, the left hand is still a movement towards divinity, but again, it's contingent on the circumstances of the cosmic cycles that make it more difficult, making the old ways less efficacious than they would have been before.
It reminded me of what you said there when you mentioned Tantra. That just sparked something in my mind of like, what someone explained to me once, the whole point of Tantra wasn't, and it wasn't just, sexual, as you said. It's like, they had things in it about, eating meat instead of, there's also like weird ones, like you go to there's some tantric manuals where it's, you go to a cemetery and you eat human flesh. And it's like, people who are all into going on a Tantra workshop, I don't hear them talking about that very often. But nonetheless, the whole point, what the guy was saying was the whole point is you have like almost a buffer in your mind. There's some kind of like knot, and you do this thing once, whether it be like drinking alcohol or eating meat or some kind of degenerate sexual practice. You do it once, and that like takes away the barrier, and it allows the energy or the mental current to flow properly. And the example he gave of like how this shifts depending on culture, because it's like the thing of like, eating meat, sexual practices, taking drugs. In the West, we do that anyway. So like a tantric practice, if you look at it in the manual, that manual was made for probably a completely different, very conservative society. And the best example of this, he gave me this, I think it's like a Chogyam Trungpa story. If you know the head of the book, the Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism book, that author, he apparently, his early students, there's one advanced meditation practice which you do, you're supposed to do it traditionally in the Tibetan system, naked, because that's uncomfortable for Tibetans. They don't like to be naked around everybody. But when Chogyam Trungpa came to the West and started teaching, the first Westerners he taught were hippies, and they were all comfortable being naked together. And so the story is he made them go and buy business suits and wear business suits and meditate in tight business suits. And I thought that was the funniest thing ever, thinking of like hippies being like, against the man, I'm never going to be one of those squares. And then like having to wear a business suit while like meditating with like a guru, that would be hilarious. But that's like that tantric thing. It's what they didn't want to do. That was the thing that they did to like do that specific practice. Anyway, I'm just rambling now, but that just reminded me of that little thing. Here we have a question from Tyler. Question: do you feel the current 93 Thelema, or Aleister Crowley's doctrine, was a net positive or a net negative for the Western esoteric movement? I kind of want to hear what you guys think first. What do you guys think about Crowley's doctrine?
I'll sit this one out because I've never read Crowley, and I honestly don't know anything about the fella.
Yeah, this is more modern stuff. We're all OGs here. Well, I read a lot of modern stuff, but do you know much about Crowley, Abbas?
I have a collection of his earlier essays. What's the Equinox, right? Is it the Equinox Journal? Yeah, I had a few of those. It's interesting. I think there's something. I'm not as well read in Crowley, but from what I gather, you can find gems in his work, and a lot of gems. But that whole premise of do what thou will. But again, I think based on I don't know how. Again, I think rather than assuming that this is like a narcissistic display of power and you just manipulate things so that you have your way, I think if you take a Platonic perspective, you understand that like the will is neither, it's not a choice. So the choice can be, again, either a choice of something good or a choice of something bad or less good. But with the will, if it's in alignment with the gods, the will is always the good. You always will the good. The good doesn't mean something. Good is a very difficult thing to kind of like define and talk about. But it's not like it's not necessarily any sort of moral good or this particular good, but the good that serves not self-interest, but the good that serves your own development, your soul becoming aware of itself, and the self itself. So again, this is like a mystical movement of knowledge towards the one of the self. But I think when my understanding is like when he's saying this, he's not giving you license for doing whatever the hell you want. It's aligning yourself with that cosmic purpose of your own that is kind of like congruent with your own self. And that means doing the good for the individual, which is yourself. But again, that has to line up with something involving virtue. And if it doesn't involve elements of virtue, then you're not aligning yourself with the cosmic, sort of the cosmic process. So that could be just completely a foreign, externalized take on Crowley. But I'm curious, Richard, how you take it.
I think it's exactly that. I'm going to just also go straight out as well and say, like, I'm a certified Crowley hater, but at the same time, I do recognize there is a lot of a debt to the modern esoteric scene. Does have a lot of debt to him, and the concept of the true will is exactly as you say. As I understand it, where he got that from, do what thou wilt, and it shall be the whole of the law, is there's an author called Rabelais, French author, and he wrote, was it Pantagruel and Gargantua? Rabelais. In that book there's a place called the Abbey of Thelema, and it's a kind of it's a utopia, and the people who live there only have one law. So there's not a list of laws that you have to obey. There's only one law that governs the utopia, and that's do what thou wilt. And so fundamentally, his idea comes from a libertine utopia, this idea of what would a new aeon, with a new aeon, a new world, a utopia, what would it look like? Well, you couldn't have laws restricting everyone. You would have only one law, do what they will. But at the same time, how do you have a country where everyone just does what they will and everyone sits on the couch and eats chocolate and watches Game of Thrones or some crap? It's like, it's exactly as you say, it has to be for the good of themselves. And or there's this tension, should I say, this understanding that your will isn't your desire. And so as long as people, to the question, Tyler, do you think it's been a net positive or a net negative? I mean, it's also, as Abbas says, there are gems in Crowley's work. I like how one guy put it. He said, when you read Crowley, you'll read something genius and then you'll turn the page and he goes full cocaine mode and ruins it. That's kind of the experience of reading Crowley. And it's like, yeah, it's like time has passed. I personally think Dion Fortune is a better author. If you do, I personally think, in fact, if you read Franz Barton and Dion Fortune, you can just kind of replace Crowley. Certified Crowley hater that I am. But like at the same time, it's like, look, he's got solid stuff. People read him, and it's not all bad. I mean, there are some things. I got so mad when I read in book 4 at the end. He has a whole treatise on past lives. Or past life recollection, how to do it. And I was reading this and I'm like, this is a blind. This will make you insane if you actually do these practices. It's the worst in the world. I was going to make a video on it, but I never got around to doing it. I was just like, I hate that anyway. But yeah, that's my take. I noticed it's getting a bit dark in the back there, Colin. We've been going for almost 2.5 hours here. How are you guys feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Feeling good?
Yeah, I feel bad that my goodness, I came 30 minutes after you've already started.
I mean, I feel bad that I got the day wrong.
I had a feeling that you were going to jump the gun a little bit on it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Hey, this is the background story here. But last time Richard and I were to meet, it was me who actually messed it up. I completely got the dates wrong. Being in Australia, you experience things well before we do. So, I was completely embarrassed, but I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad now it's even. Now we can both hang our heads in shame. Yeah.
It's Colin's turn next.
Yeah. This actually worked out like way better actually, because now I had to plan around some things tomorrow, so it synchronistically worked out great.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent. Ooh, this is interesting, bro. Talent. Could the middle path be called Abraxas path? So this left hand and right hand dichotomy, I've heard some people say, or there's a dictatum by some alchemists, that you have to walk with the staff in the right hand but balance with the left foot. So it's like you have the principles of the right hand way, but at the same time, if you have to walk amongst the dirt, the black magicians, you can do that without being corrupted. Or if you can do that without being corrupted, there's this secret third thing. There's the path of the razor's edge that belongs in between the two. If you fall one way, you become a demon. If you fall the other way, you become a god. And that's still a fall. You're still in the circle. But it's like there is some extreme transcendent thing beyond that. I guess what he's asking, if we'd call it the Abraxas path, I don't know if I'd call it that, but Abraxas is interesting. Combination of opposites in that sense, so you could call it that. But yeah, what do you guys think on that? That's interesting.
I think there's always like a settling of accounts. So let's say we do something in service of the self that harms others. Maybe we're not even aware of it. I do think at some level, possibly in a post-life state or what have you, or possibly in this life, through forgiveness and literally people coming together and having conversations and stuff. I think that there's always a way to settle the account. And this is the whole, that the idea that karma has to be settled out. The circle has to be rounded out with karma. So, if you're taking an action that is going to harm other individuals, it's like one of the actual universal features across near-death experiences, ancient and modern, is the reconciliation in the post-life realm, right? That there's some sense of judgment. My personal approach to this is that you will now be in a state where you can actually judge your own actions in life from a way more exalted, and you have access to the true understanding of what your actions have done. And in a lot of these accounts, you actually experience the harm that you did to individuals through their eyes. And you get to, it's not just you're told that you hurt someone, but you feel that. And so you would want to reconcile that. You would want to balance the account. So with all this left hand, right hand conversation, it's like, maybe we should keep that, in mind. And it's the whole, like, if you're voluntarily descending, or if you're voluntarily, bringing the darkness in, sorry, someone was calling me. I lost my train of thought here. If you're voluntarily going into the darkness, is it to find the light in the end? Is it like to just produce a sense of guilt that you will never do that act anyway? It already seems like we have enough tragedy and enough suffering in our life where, we should probably just head in that more virtuous direction. Maybe I'm simplifying this a little too much, but yeah.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer.
No, I like that. And just to build on that, it's like we are all, in a way, whether we know it or not, or consciously doing it or not, we're all demiurgic, we're all little demiurges, in a way, of our own cosmos, in our own world. And I think it's the way in which we invite certain energies and principles into our lives. Sometimes they invite themselves, but it's what we do with it, how we transform it, how we bring these sort of forms into our life that really dictates the nature of the life that we're experiencing. Even, and not to say that you can ever get the perfect life where there is no suffering and no harm, but that you cause others and others cause you. But again, by sort of being deliberate and conscientious, and using these powers conscientiously, you can craft the world in a fashion that's more conducive to the betterment of your soul and the people around you as well. And again, there is that sense of repayment. Nothing comes for free. And even blessings, you have to be careful with blessings, because we're very partial, finite beings, and we don't understand the full ramifications of that. So again, I think there's always that element of uncertainty when we're dealing with powers beyond us, because we can't see the full picture of what the consequences are. And so we always have to be a bit humble. We always have to defer a little bit our sense of self-sufficiency and our capacity to understand the world around us and the cause and effect of things. So again, like even the idea of harming others or putting a curse upon someone, who's to say it doesn't rebound? And, some authors would actually say that, it will actually be repaid back in full. So it's just something to keep in mind, right? Nothing goes without an accounting.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I just had a funny thought. Now that we're kind of getting more casual, do you guys have any esoteric movies? What's your favorite? What are your favorite esoteric movies or media, like TV shows? Like, are you a fan of Twin Peaks? Like, what's your? Can you give some esoteric movie recommendations?
I hope this fits like that genre, but Princess Mononoke from the
oh dang,
yes, okay. I love that.
We got a Studio Ghibli enjoying it.
That's a good one. That's a good
based. I love Mononoke. I love Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah,
and all of that stuff.
I like Twin Peaks. I found the third one very strange. Like I found it very hard to follow sometimes, because you're just sitting there for lazy long shots. But I love the first two seasons, and then Fire Walk with Me was really good, but it was really disturbing as well. But I would say my favorite esoteric film is Jacob's Ladder.
Okay, what's that?
Colin, have you watched this one? Oh my goodness.
Sell it.
Oh, okay. So I don't want to give too much away, but it's set in, I think, the 70s in New York City. And it's 70s where it's like very dingy in New York, and crime is really bad, and there's graffiti everywhere. And this one guy, he was a PhD before, and then he went to Vietnam and came back and decided he's going to turn off his brain. He's going to stop thinking about things. He wants to live a very plain, simple life, kind of like numb it all out. And he becomes like a postal service driver, delivering mail. And he has a girlfriend, and she's like this very, I think her name is Jezebel. So again, there's all these like interesting biblical connotations, names, associations, and he starts to see things. And what I love about this film is it's very subtle. It's not, there's a little bit of jump scare, but like not too much to make it like kind of like a bit of a farce, but it's actually really subtle. It's a very psychological film, and it's very eerie. And then there's like a big, I don't know, I can't give any more of it away, but essentially he starts to see very disturbing things in the everyday. And a lot of it is associated with the subway. Like the first scene or the first couple of scenes, there is like, he's in this like dirty subway train, and it's like abandoned, and he's trying to get out, but it's locked, and he has to go this other way. It's I'm not really selling it very well, but I'm just giving you a little bit of like an image here to dwell on. But you should definitely check out Jacob's Ladder.
Okay, I'll check that out.
To sum it up, there's a Gnostic element there, and I think an interesting psychological Gnostic element.
Okay,
and I think you have to watch it.
Now I'm in.
Yeah,
I'll have to find it. So was it with Colin, with Princess Mononoke? Are you an anime enjoyer as well, Colin?
Oh yes, like there's like 90% of it, just like dubstep or something. It's like 95% of it is garbage in my opinion, and then there's like that secret 5% that's just so great.
Okay.
What did I recently watch? The 2 anime movies, the Vampire Hunter D. Some of those.
Going back old
I just discovered it. So there's like all these animes that I haven't watched, but Miyazaki sort of turned me on to anime for sure. A good modern show is what is it called? It's based on the League of Legends.
Arcana.
Yeah, Arcane. Yes. Yeah. Oh my God! Absolutely great show there.
Okay. I was going to ask, do you read manga as well as anime, or are you just an anime only watcher?
No, I don't read any manga, but I like a good movie and TV show every once in a while.
Okay. I was just checking how deep you go.
I saw this. I'm not an avid watcher of anime, but there was this. I came across this one based on a reading I was doing on Abbas. He was in the imperial court of Japan, and he was part of this. Do you know this? Richard? You're nodding your head.
Are you talking? Is this a movie called Omniaji?
Yes, Omniaji.
Yin Yang Masters.
Yes, that's right. And so
yes.
Again, it's like he's an occultist, but there's like this, and this is a true story. He was considered like an exorcist in a way, and there was this division of the imperial dynasty in the government there that dealt with sort of all matters of occult knowledge and astrology, and he was considered like one of the best. But what I found very interesting about this Netflix show was that all of them, the idea of the Japanese understanding of hauntings and possessions is that it tends to be like these things that people can't let go of in their lives, and then they die or something tragic happens to them, and they're still stuck to that, that emotion that they had, whether it's jealousy or heartbreak. And so again, the exorcist needs to come and sort of release them from those attachments. It's very very Buddhist.
That's actually a great movie. I completely forgot about that until you reminded me. I was like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, for people in the chat who want to like look this up, it's called Omniaji. But like, if you can't spell that, I can't spell it off the top of my head. Sometimes it's called Yin Yang Masters, but there's a bunch of movies called Yin Yang Masters, so watch out for that. But it's like I think that was in the 70s as well. It's another movie from the 70s. Like,
was it? I think that maybe they did an earlier one in Netflix. No, maybe later one perhaps.
So maybe there's one on Netflix that's like later. But I saw like a 70s version of Omniaji. But it's the same kind of character. It's Abi no Seimei. Yeah, and it's that whole Well, an omniage, for those who don't know, if you think of like in the Western world, a kind of a court astrologer, court alchemist, the equivalent of that in the East are the omniage, these kind of court Taoists who have like Shinto Buddhist powers, and
It was Taoist. It was Taoist.
Such a good movie.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, now that we're on the topic of movies, you mentioned like the abysmal state of authentic movies and stuff right now. Like, all right, are y'all a fan of Troy, Gladiator, The Patriot, Braveheart, those kind of movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the movies we need to sort of like get back to. Hopefully, Nolan's Odyssey is good, even though there's been a little criticisms there with like the armor and I don't think that I think the ships that they were driving are like more of like Viking ships, and they weren't the triremes or whatever. So some errors there, probably going to get some criticism, but Nolan's my favorite director, so hopefully he pulls it through.
Did you see Ridley Scott's Exodus with like Christian Bale?
Yeah.
Was that any good?
It didn't. Yeah, it didn't really land for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, because that was another one historical where I was like, oh, but I never got around to seeing. But everyone was shocked.
Well, Ridley Scott fell off hard. Like I think he fell off pretty hard. Like Gladiator is a masterpiece. Masterpiece. And,
I don't know. It's interesting because they always, I don't know, when you listen to interviews with Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott, they keep on criticizing the script. Like they were writing the script as they were going and revising it, and they were kind of like criticizing their own work. And I was like, are you kidding? This is the only movie that I continually cry at. Like every single time I watch, I cry at the ending of that
at
film.
The end, me too.
Yeah, so it seems strange. Sometimes the artist or the creator doesn't really quite understand the impact of what they've made. They're just seeing it from a different angle sometimes. So yeah, I don't know.
But I mentioned that because there are so many places in history that are like, I mean, there's so many stories out there. There's so many fantastic stories. And I don't know why it's coming to mind, but if y'all haven't read the Chronographia of who was it? Michael Sellis, the Byzantine chronographer and so forth. If you haven't read Chronographia, buy just the Penguin Classics edition and just like go to one chapter and start reading, because that book is fantastic. I mean, there's a scene in there where he's describing firsthand an entire like palace revolt, and you get the whole background in there. There's a shift in power, the new up-jump emperor that was put in place, by like guy pulling his strings. He like rejects all the people that helped get him in power. He like banishes Princess Zoe and whatnot, and the people just, oh my God, they swarm the palace. They're tearing, they're ready to burn the whole palace down. And he's giving you a first person point of view during this palace revolt. And it's just like, it's one of the most fantastic firsthand historical accounts I've come across. So there's like, and there's so many stories like that baked into history where has this ever happened in history? And it's like, yes, revolutions inside cities have happened, like emperors have done really terrible things. So some people were like, the evil person doing all these terrible things is just a caricature. And it's just this trope. But if you look in Genghis Khan's generals and Emperor Elagabalus, no, those kind of figures existed. They were on the margins, but they were out there.
I always think like the stories of alchemists like Paracelsus and Agrippa, they would make great stories as well. Yeah. We hardly see any of, unless it's like they're in an anime or something like that.
Yeah, we need to get a Christopher Nolan that directs just sort of like movies like this, great historical episodes.
What's his name? Freaking Eggers, the lighthouse guy who did Nosferatu. Have you been keeping up with his stuff?
I saw Nosferatu. I wanted to see the one with the lighthouse. I wanted to see that one. I didn't get a chance to, but I saw Nosferatu, which is very interesting.
I got to say, the lighthouse has some very interesting pagan versus Christian, and then there's this symbolism of the light keepers are almost like Vestal fire priests kind of fighting over the place of the fire. It's actually really good.
Wow,
I actually love The Lighthouse. Great movie. And I think it's very esoteric. But like Nosferatu as well, that was done really well. Like I was a fan of Bram Stoker, and then like he's kind of combining the Nosferatu Bram Stoker thing, and
then the last scene where it's just like you see them together in bed. And with the flowers, or I think roses, there's petals are all around. But that was exactly, I'm not sure if you picked up on this, but that's a very old European theme of Death in the Maiden. And if you actually look up images of Death in the Maiden, it's an old trope, but you can see some illustrations, and I almost reproduced it identically. That embrace where they're both kind of entwined. So it's this idea of like almost like a virginal, beautiful, feminine figure, and almost a complete counter opposite is this deathly, grotesque creature, death itself. And so it's that interplay of life and, new generation, and the death that's kind of like, incumbent upon it to go through, and that cycle of life and death together in an embrace. It's really, he did some really poetic things in that film. It was really good.
Nice.
I loved the alchemist in that film, the alchemist character. I would
William Dafoe.
Yeah, I would like just give me a movie about him, same director, like just give me that movie,
Yeah, that's very good.
Yes, if you see like actually William Dafoe, because he did the same director did the Norseman, and also so William Dafoe's in the Norseman, he's in Nosferatu, and he's in The Lighthouse. And there are all of these parts in the movies where he has a monologue. And this is actually one thing. If you go back and like look at those movies, this kind of shows William Dafoe. He goes into a kind of a little trance, and he doesn't blink the entire time. So the camera's just solid on his face, and he just doesn't blink while he's talking. It actually just adds to it. Really, like if you ever go back and watch any of those movies, just keep an eye on William Dafoe. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, shall we get a little I kind of want to get a little political.
Okay.
There's a question from Aliu here again. Slight tangent. What are your political leanings? Do you think we should separate the Hermetic from the state, or should politics be a separate domain in a perfect world, or in your perfect world?
All right.
You want to jump in, Colin?
Yes, because I've been talking about this with some friends here recently. It's like philosophy and politics. They've always been married together in the Western tradition a little bit. If you think about Pythagoras, political reformer, Plato's Republic, there's all these instances where the philosopher always has some ideas about politics as well, right? So I think those things are always a little bit married. I consider myself an independent realist, so it allows me to be a party of one and look at things from the realistic perspective, which is basically we're in a very grotesque state of politics right now, and a lot of it's self-serving. And in America, it feels like it's a runaway train, and everyone is stuffing as much money in their pockets as they can before, the brakes are already gone. So the train is going to, it's going to crash, and everyone's stuffing their pockets as much as they can before it all crashes at the top. And then the guys on the bottom and the middle class, they're left to try to pay the bill at the end of the day. It's such a shame. Because I do love America, and I do find a lot of richness in the founding fathers, and I think that we did something extremely unique over here. And there's a lot of virtues in America that go, I think, unrecognized. But right now, it is there is a obscene level of tyranny and corruption and underhanded dealings going on. And I mean, I've seen some of this firsthand. I used to do work a little bit in government contracts, and it's a grimy, sludgy, snake bite, backstabbing world that if you don't understand that layer is there, then that's great. You can live in the naive world, and it'll be fine. But at least make sure that your husband should understand it, or something, like someone it's there. There's that shadow world, the shadow world the shadow world of the contractors and everything else. And yeah, it's kind of a timeless story. So yeah, tangent myself, but
Abbas, what are your thoughts on politics and the Hermetic? Or
I
do you
mean,
just keep it separate?
I completely agree with Colin. I think similarly, I'm a realist. Yeah, it's a problem because I can empathize with many different people's positions, and I can understand why they're inclined to a particular political ideology or worldview. And again, there's certain truths on both sides. I have a personal disposition to, I guess, of course, I used to be a traditionalist, right? So I have more of a traditional perspective on things. But I increasingly, for the past 10 or so years, have kind of like adopted a more realist position, analysis of power dynamics, outside of sort of a lot of the drivel and the garbage and the slop, as they call it, right? So, but again, even the idea of sort of this embeddedness of politics and religion, I completely agree. Politics ultimately is it's the arena of power dynamics, and it's the way power manifests in the world, in institutions, on the individual level, on the community level. So it's inextricable with one's spiritual position, religious practices. And just like Colin said, a lot of the laws were given by lawgivers who, came not so much necessarily from, these are very mystical people, right? If you're talking about Pythagoras as a reformer, he's incredible. He's considered the head of the Western mystical tradition. So again, there's that intimacy there, and he had his own different communes and his own sort of revolutionary takes on ancient culture. And Empedocles, similarly, was he was very much against. He was really much for democracy, but he was against sort of a lot of the Athenian sort of imposition of tyrannical rule and sort of universalizing tendencies that the Athenians wanted to impose. So he was very much an active participant against that. But again, it's it's interrelated. A community, a community is, and a tradition emerges through the relationship between the people who live in a particular location and the deities that reside there as well. So it's literally a communion between the two, and that's how tradition emerges. That's how politics emerges. That's how institutions emerge. That's how things function. And there is no way you can remove one from the other. The idea of separation of church and state is a very modern notion, very particular to a monotheistic lens. By the way, I just wanted to know who has this Apollonian prophetic raven in the background chattering away. Is that?
That's me. Sorry. Yeah.
What is it? What is it? What is it?
It's just the freaking. There's just these magpies just yapping. Sorry, I should put myself on mute.
Is that what they're magpies? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry guys.
It's not as intense as I thought it was, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Well, just to add to that, I think there's always with chaos, there's always this opportunity to like develop the new thing, and no one seems to be solution oriented right now. And it's like if the old system is crumbling, and it will sort of crumble, and there will be this chaotic sort of destruction going on, everyone's going to flock to whatever new system comes around, to replacing it, right? So I mean, I'm living in a mostly off-grid cabin at the moment, and this is like a realization of, my own effort to like try to individually live in my own kind of parallel community, at least individually, so I can put a little money where my mouth is. I have the opportunity to do that, for my circumstances, but I think the opportunity is to build these parallel communities that are totally self-sustainable. I mean, if you can generate your own energy, generate your own food, and everyone kind of contributes in a way, but you're also interacting and living in the laws of the actual country you live in, that's going to create a number of examples of a kind of new system or a sustainable system to go to when it all collapses.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. As for me, I have I'm exactly the same as you guys. I look at it from the Rosicrucian perspective, and in the manifestos, it's like it's not just a redemption of the church, but the world itself. We need to create new laws. Laws have been a forgotten part of philosophy. It's not political science, it's political philosophy. This is actually an extension. Because in philosophy, it's like, you have your metaphysics, your ontology, which kind of then informs your ethics, how you live in the world. But then your ethics is a microcosmic thing. It's like how me as an individual, but then how you interact with society as a whole, the macrocosmic scale, the unfolding of that is your politic. And so politics flows on very naturally, and it's important. And so for me, I always find it hard because I also see people's reasoning, and I understand why some people are upset, and some people want to do this system or try that system, or some people want the world to go multipolar, and some people think, no, a tyrant should take over, like a dictator, and just get it all done with. Some people want to accelerate. Some people think left wing, right wing, or become an upwinger. Me, I hate bureaucrats. And here's my thing. I think I'm not against the proletariat and I'm not against the aristocracy, but there is a class of people who are absolute parasites on the academy, on military, and on all branches of political government. And if you brought back the death penalty, but just for administrational fraud. So it's not a death penalty. You don't want to be like, you death penalty for this, and then some journalist apparently did this, and now we're going to silence him. It's like, no, death penalty only for administrational fraud, and just clear out. It's not. Once again, proletariat, minorities, yes, we can all be together and hold hands. Aristocracy, yes, write your poetry, have your yacht. That bourgeoisie, bureaucracy, I just, they've gone too far.
We don't want to welcome in the another reign of terror or something there, but
I'm just saying.
I with the frustration with the bureaucrats though is definitely felt. It's like you can manufacture a hammer for like $5, and then by the time it passes through the bureaucracies and the government contract comes around, the hammer costs $500. And all that happened in between is a bunch of redundant paperwork and people putting money in their pockets without contributing to the thing, and that's caused a lot of this. Inflated currency that's going on. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it is bound to be a very interesting life here, gentlemen.
Yeah, I've got another question here. Surf asks, what is initiation, and is it a choice? I assume he's saying internal initiation, this internal awakening that happens to people like Jakob Boehm, not applying at a Masonic hall and getting an initiation. What is initiation, and is it by choice? What do you boys think?
This is a difficult one. Because I've been thinking about this a while, and again, I'm torn between two realities, or as things as they should be and things as they are. But from what I know, from what I've researched, it's like the idea of initiation has to be transmitted from a master. You need to be initiated by someone. And you know what? I personally agree with it? Yes and no. So that's why I find I'm a little bit torn between sort of this, like with this question, because I think if you're, a lot of traditions, like current traditions, they'll say, well, you can't be, you can't get into this particular church, you can't be in this particular you know, you can't be in this particular religious movement if you're not initiated by someone, and whether that's like through a priest or guru or whatever the case might be. And I think there's a certain, I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for those types of revealed religions, you know, something that has an institution. And, you know, I'm also even disagreeing with what I've just said, because I honestly think, you know, maybe it's even more important in an institution for there to be someone to initiate you into it. But I think in terms of an esoteric level, if we look at the sort of Hermetic writings in the Corpus Hermeticum, you know, it's very much a relationship between the father, the spiritual father, and their spiritual child. And there are many different ways in which one is quote unquote initiated. But that initiation, it's almost like they're opening a door for you. They're using their voice, and they're using visualization, and they're using touch to initiate someone. So there is a necessity for another person to be there to bring you into the fold. It's not simply something you can do on your own with your own resources. That being said, I just want to qualify that, you know, if something reveals itself to you, that's a completely different situation. Like if a god reveals itself to you in an epiphany, I mean, like Yakabuma, right? He was in the field and he had the vision of everything. Would you call that an initiation? Some people would say no, it was not systematic in some sort of body of, you know, writings or rituals. But at the other on the other side, you can say it was an initiation. But again, it was initiation by something that wasn't human. So I'm ambivalent about. I believe there's initiation, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, who's doing the initiating is a question that's up for debate, and it could look very differently from the external point of view of someone. It could look like a teacher and a master and a pupil, or it can look like nothing really, just someone walking in the park.
Yeah, I think we can get a little bit more mileage out of the initiation term, because, you know, let's take like a Masonic initiation, for instance. Okay, so, you know, this is it's the institution. There's there's elders, so there's that let's say guru aspect of it, or mentoring aspect, and you get initiated into this system, and, you know, each individual might have a different experience of that initiation. For some, it might be a little more numinous. For some, it might be this very kind of concrete and physical thing where now you have to contemplate the variety of symbols and phrases and, you know, the catechism and so forth. Now, you know, if I would answer this question honestly from my own experience, it's like I could take that, and that's a formal initiation, defined. There's a degree there. Everyone has to accept it within the institution. But does that compare to the kind of, let's say, self-initiations or natural initiations where, you know, possibly spontaneously a vision occurs, an experience happens, there's some like divinatory thing that occurs, a profound synchronicity? You know, I like to consider these initiatory moments as well, because they are initiating you into the reality of the divine, you know, as it manifests in your daily life. And if an institutional initiation can't communicate that, for me, it's not actually successful, right? It's just a more self-serving, you know, serves the institution itself, and it doesn't necessarily apply it like ontologically. So for me, I actually believe a little bit more in the, you know, can you be with a group of people and have a spontaneous group experience that's initiatory? You can too. So it doesn't have to be necessarily just the individual, but I think we should leave room for all of that as well, and be able to stretch initiation into that, into there, because, you know, some people might, oh, well, that's just unverified personal gnosis or whatever, but it's not for you. It's for the individual that had the experience. It was their experience. It's not yours. So it's not up to someone else to necessarily determine whether or not for you that was an initiation or not, right? So you could get initiated into 4 different esoteric schools, and then one time you can have this beautiful, totally sober, unifying experience out in nature sometime, and that might have more of an effect and carry through your life a little bit differently than the institutional aspects. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I say with to extend that as well, to be an initiate, because there is, as I am a Crowley hater, I am also a Rene Guénon hater a little bit, just a little bit, and I really don't like. It's not that I don't like. I actually just disagree with the. You need an initiator. You need a kind of a master, physically, and it's not that I don't think that that's necessary and you just need to go off and everyone needs to go off and do it individually, and if you want to join an institution, it's like no, actually all of those things are important, because initiation to me is it's because some people, when they use the term initiation, like in Eastern terms, in Buddhism, it's literally like you just get a teaching means initiation, and I'm like nah. An initiation to me is some ontological change in being, like what we were talking with knowing and being. When knowing and being connects, a change happens, but it's not a boxer, it's not learning to play the piano, it's not really getting some philosophy. There's this other thing, a spiritual experience that changes our being. That to a degree is initiation, and it can be performed via a sacred rite. So the whole point of like the initiator, what Guénon talks about in Aspects of Initiation, which I loved that book up to like chapter 10, and then I was like throwing it against the wall halfway through. But what he's basically saying is initiation needs, like a plant, to make a plant grow, you don't like reach into the plant and pull the plant like, come on buddy, grow. Like that doesn't make it grow. To make a plant grow, it needs the correct soil, it needs like water, it needs the correct amount of sun. And so in the same way, we need the correct mineral nourishment, we need the correct teachings, we need some water, we need some teacher, maybe a teacher, an initiator, maybe a proper environment, the sun. We need perhaps for a sacred rite to take place, some sacred rites take place in a certain astrological period of time, or when there's a certain connection, or something from above strikes us. But it's like, in the end, you do get people like Jakob Boehm, you do get people like Garab Dorje in the East, who, you look at like lineages of Buddhism, and it's like, oh, it goes back to the Buddha, and there's like Garab Dorje taught by Dakinis, and so the feminine energy of the universe within the astral plane. Cool. Like that wasn't a sacred rite then, was it? So there's something, it seems to be, for me, that there is some kind of body of work, there is some kind of preparation that one can do themselves. And if they're organized in a particular way, they can have that experience, as you're saying, Colin, they can have that experience, and that's legitimate. And it's like, there may even be a crossover, that like someone from the outskirts can add to a tradition, and the traditions can also ratify and clarify certain experiences that the people on the outskirts have. This is then the marriage or the relationship between revelation and tradition, which Christianity has done quite poorly, in my opinion, over the many centuries. Where theology, I don't like theologists. I always find theology is a pretentious art of reading other people's spiritual experiences and deriving universal laws from their spiritual experiences. That's what theology kind of boils down to in a Christian context. And so it's like, yeah, I'm just kind of rambling now, but that's my take on initiation.
Well,
sorry. Where are the centers of initiation? They've all been destroyed. Or maybe you do have access to a Masonic Lodge or a Golden Door group, but maybe you don't. But that's not a time to despair. You can still begin the work yourself. That's why I'm hopeful for interior initiation.
Well, just to add one quick thing on that, it's like in the ancient, all around the ancient Mediterranean, the different initiatory schools and the mysteries around there. One of the features that you see from these different figures that were initiated themselves, and you can know that they're initiated because they say something up to a certain point, and then they say that they can no longer speak about it, right? But one of the common things, as Cicero says, is it kind of it reduces, if not obliterates, your fear of death. Okay, so the idea then is that it's bringing you into some direct knowingness with the understanding that you will survive the physical death. So, in that sense, that is kind of the usefulness and at least one of the primary purposes of initiation. So, at least in the Western esoteric tradition, that's my read on it. Because if you look back in all the sources talking about those mystery schools, they're talking about the reduction of the fear of death, right? So, if your initiation doesn't actually help in that regard, then at least in the classical sense, it doesn't necessarily have that. It doesn't ring as strongly enough. So yeah, I think initiation should apply in that sense. And we're dealing with a time where, I can't make the pilgrimage necessarily to the temple at Eleusis or some of these other things. So again, I think we need to watch out for belief systems that are self-limiting, and all of a sudden we've put ourselves in this box that we can no longer access because of our belief systems, when really there was never a limitation there to begin with. And that's why people without formal initiations, without formal trainings, can spontaneously, even though they've done all this unconsciously, they've done all this preparation, they can have these experiences that now, they know, at least for themselves, that, you can survive.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're both saying. I'm because I'm torn again. Like I'm on one side agreeing with everything you're saying about the self-initiatory aspects of it, but I'm also looking sort of even at the Pythagorean sort of if you wanted to join the Pythagoreans, you had to observe silence for 5 years. So, and I think when we're talking about gurus, I think we're not talking about didactic teachings. We're not necessarily talking about that. And like you were saying, Richard, like initiation fundamentally is a transformation of the person, and that material, whether the transformation is successful or not, comes off is really up to the person inside, like what they have inside them, right? That innate gnosis, and their ability to sort of lean into that. But I think there's an external aspect. There is someone else who is present, who doesn't. It's like a midwife. It's not like they're dumping information into you, telling you secrets, and then you're initiated. It's not a knowledge of that sort, because even to be a mystis, right, to be an initiate, the base of that is muo, right, which involves being silent, not speaking, and in a way you become. It kind of suggests there's a passive aspect to it, where you are not being filled with something like your teacher's sort of wisdom necessarily, but they're almost like helping you give birth to something, or a rebirth of yourself. And when you do have a knowledgeable, and I don't even want to use the word knowledgeable, that's not even the right one, but when you are in contact with someone who has that presence, that embodied presence of the divine, it really, that transfer becomes much more solid. It's I think with the self it becomes a little bit more tricky, because you're in an ocean of uncertainty. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Is there even such a thing as right and wrong? There's a lot that comes into this, that can be clarified and kind of circumscribed a little bit by someone who has already become themselves initiated and has followed that path. So again, it's external, but it's also the person is allowing something to emerge within you and helping you along that process. And I think it's a pity, right? Like I've lamented this in other videos. I lament the fact that we don't, in a certain respect, it's liberating, but it's also saddening that we don't trust anyone anymore. And I don't think we have cause to trust very many people who claim to be gurus and spiritual leaders, So I think we're in a bit of a bind. And the best thing we can do is rely on not just our resources, but even those that are given to us by the gods. So, yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, very, very well said. Very well said. Here's an interesting question. What do you guys think of Rudolf Steiner? Do you guys have any takes on Rudolf Steiner?
Yeah, I way back in the day I read at least one of his books. I'm open-minded to Steiner's material. I don't necessarily accept it all as truth or anything like that, but I think there's a lot to be gained there.
Yeah, the anthroposophy. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Anthroposophy.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's a bit of a mouthful. I remember. Yeah, I mean, in the 19th century, they love these, systematic grand narratives, and I find Jung was very critical of Steiner, and I kind of found it very insightful, where he's like, well, if you can, I don't know if this is obviously the exact quote, but it's like, if you can channel Atlantean language, in another state of consciousness, I wish you would decipher linear A or B or something like that, something more practical. Perhaps you can, get those spirits to give us a little bit more of a practical, approach to linguistics in an arcane language. But so I think it kind of expresses his skepticism there. And I think I would share slightly that skepticism, but I mean, who am I to tell people what to read? I think if it moves you, there's a reason why it moves you, and his work moves you. So, go for it.
My take on Stein is pretty much the same. I've listened to a lot of his lectures on YouTube, and people don't know this, but some of his stuff is very grounded, and then some of his stuff, he'll talk about Buddha reincarnating on Mars and becoming the Christ of Mars, and you're like, Steiner, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, bruh. But in regards to Steiner as just the guy, I've read, what is it, a lot of his books actually aren't books. They're actually, he gave lectures, and they're just transcribed in collections. But one book he actually wrote was the Knowledge of Higher Worlds book, and I would actually recommend that as a great intro book for anyone wanting to get into the Western tradition. Even that's a great book to read. He came out of German idealism. His very first work, it's called Philosophy of Freedom, where he basically argues for free will, but it's translated now as intuitional thinking as a spiritual path, because he goes off on all of these tangents within that book. It's quite a good book, and it's quite has a bit of a philosophical rigor to it. He's also kind of going on to this thing. It's like, oh, Kant talked about the experiences of the senses and the a priori judgments which you can make with your mind, but he's missing something, secret third thing. And so Steiner's mission is about this call to crystallize or grow new organs of cognition within us: imagination, inspiration, intuition. And that's not just la-di-da. It's his imagination is the imaginal. His inspiration is more of a communication between the man and the daemon. His intuition is more of a Bergsonian tradition. Intuition. It's your essence actually connecting, and what would you call it? And connecting with your spirit, connecting with the spirit of something else, and you actually gaining direct knowledge of something. It's direct gnosis. It's samadhi. So I like him. I think he's good. I think, to keep from going too schizo, he had a very good appreciation of the Christ. If you listen to I think he's got a lecture on the Gospels. That's solid lecture. And his books, I think he's got there's a trilogy of books I recommend: Knowledge of Higher Worlds, Intuitional Thinking of a Spiritual Path, and An Outline of Occult Science. If you just read those and then listen to a couple of his lectures, you're all good, guys. You don't need was it Nulu who asked the question on Steiner? You don't need to be a Steiner follower. He's got some. If you want to go full Steiner, he says some interesting stuff. But that's my take on Steiner. Now we got Random Hermit. He's asking, what esoteric, and a little a bit of a gnome profile
Yeah,
picture there.
love the hat. Love the hat. Yeah.
But what esoteric texts from antiquity do you recommend first? I guess this is where you guys. What do you think, Colin? You're shaking your head there. What's
I'm
the
shaking
first
my
one?
head at just my general inability to reduce like these things to just one book. I'm so incapable
If you had
of that.
top three.
See, but those top three would be dependent on like my excitement at the moment, right? Like I would tell you to go like read Synesius on Dreams and on Imperial Rule and stuff, because he's such an understudied or like unshared, mind out there, and he sort of has a great story. See, now I have to think. Now you got me thinking, so I'll let Abbas carry the water for me a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, the Alcibiades one, in terms of Platonic discourse, it's a good initiation into opening up yourself to the acknowledgement of your own self. It's the first path that it's the first essentially book that Iamblichus would recommend that you read in that series of works. But again, there's this scale of different dialogues that it really depends on the level that the person is currently at, philosophically or spiritually, but also what their intention is. So it could be a range depending if you're a politician, if you're you want to be an artist, a poet. So it really depends on what you're trying to get. If you just want to be a more virtuous person, and I think the last few are like the Timaeus and the Parmenides. I think is like the last one that you'd be going to, which would be very like cosmological, very very esoteric, I guess, metaphysical. But that being said, I would say, the Corpus Hermeticum is arranged in such a manner that if you start from the first book, like the Poemandres, that in itself is an initiatory text. If you delve deeply into the Poemandres, like, that will open you up to pathways that you would want to further explore if you're interested in the esoteric and the occult. And again, someone in the chat mentioned the Ogdoad and the Ennead, right? So these are like discourses on the Ennead, Ogdoad and the Ennead, and with this you really get that sense of the sympathy that happens between the master and the pupil. There is really a sense in which at one point they actually have to make prolonged eye contact with one another, and in that sense, he's being guided, but allowing that parts of himself to reveal the revelation at the end of that series, so that he can go to the Ogdoad and then at the next level reach the Ennead. So again, these initiatory practices, so much depends on the student themselves and their own natural abilities. But there is that facilitation role with the sort of the teacher. But yeah, I would say I would say just read the Corpus Hermeticum in all its different books. It's everything is there. So much is there. It's just how deeply you read it, how much you want to extract from it. Yeah.
That's a good choice. You agree,
Yes.
Colin?
I agree, because I've given that exact sort of in the Corpus Hermeticum as my answer, and then later on I'm like, man, did I kind of botch that? I probably should have had something different. But now I'm glad that someone else agrees, because the Poemandres, if all the other Corpus Hermeticum like was destroyed or whatever, and you still had the Poemandres, that's still like there's a lot there. I remember reading Iamblichus's Life of Pythagoras, the Taylor translation, and that's a really, really beginner friendly and accessible story that opens you up to a lot of different areas. Another great one is the Life of Apollonius of Tyana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is just a beautiful story, and it captivated me as much as any of my like favorite novels. So it'll present very useful information through this narrative structure that's already fascinating.
Yeah. Philostratus is he's great.
Yes.
The Random Hermit also has another question for us. Like, what's the view of the Christ in Hermeticism and theurgy? That's interesting, because I would say, like, I don't know, Hermeticism, isn't that whole thing of like Porphyry goes to the oracle and asks the oracle about Christ? And there's like one section and the oracle's like, yeah, he was cool, but his followers, that was the basic lowdown.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is to me, this is like, I mean, I'm gonna get a rise from, I'm sure, some of your viewers, but in the Corpus Hermeticum, there really isn't any Christian influence. There's some Jewish influence, but it's mainly Greek and mostly Egyptian. Anything that is synthesizing Christological perspectives on Corpus Hermeticum, like I think most of that work was done by Marsilio Ficino in the Renaissance, to kind of like, he was one of the first translators of that work and bringing it into Europe. But the Corpus Hermeticum is by and large Egyptian in origin and just translated into Greek, but they're in like a lot of Hellenistic influences. A little bit of Babylonian, perhaps, but there is no Christian influence in this. There's some Gnostic elements, and but like an established Christian Orthodox understanding is a much later interpolation, much later addition to it. So to me, when people say Christian Hermeticism, Christian theurgy, you can talk about Christian theurgy. I think theurgy is broad enough to encompass all sorts of religious practices. It's not bound by any sort of theology. It is like a set of practices in a way. It's kind of like a mode of being with the gods and ritualizing that encounter. But Hermeticism, it's a much later phenomenon. Of course, you're going to get writers who who try to incorporate elements.
So, I was going to say, so when some Christian writers come out and say like, oh yeah, the Poimandre is the actual being or the divine Poimander, what is it? Speaking to Hermes, that is actually the Christ,
right?
Jesus speaking to him. So the Hermetic is just the fifth gospel of Christianity, bro.
And
you don't buy that?
Exactly to your point, Richard, though. Like the Poimandres has for many, many centuries been sort of interpreted and translated as shepherd. Poimander means, I think, in Greek, it's a shepherd of people. So the assumption was, a shepherd of people. So of course this must be Christ. But if you actually look at the etymology of it, it's like pe aime re, something along those lines, which is like an Egyptian transliteration of the intelligence of Re, or the knowledge of Re, the god, the Egyptian god Re. So, which means that the intelligence of Re in the epithets in the Egyptian texts is essentially Hermes. It's Thoth. So, the Poimandres is Thoth. It's not like Christ in Christ in a bodysuit or something, but. Yeah, but the thing is, I don't want to sound like, obviously I want to make a distinction, like that, just a historical distinction and like in terms of influence and what influenced what. But at the same time, I'm not antagonistic towards Christ. Christianity might be a little different story, and I'm not even that antagonistic towards Christianity per se. But I think the Christ itself can easily be seen as a prophet. So in the Sufis, they consider this, and in Islam, they consider this very much part of their orthodoxy, that Christ was one of the prophets sent by Allah. So again, I don't disparage Christ, the Christ figure, but again, I think it's important to reevaluate a lot of the influences that we've taken for granted from a lot of 20th century and 19th century scholarship, and even earlier, that's try to not necessarily deliberately, but like because they've been steeped in that theological and metaphysical presupposition of Christianity and monotheism, I think they're reading these texts with that in mind. rather than trying to, I hate the word, but like it deconstruct essentially, their own worldview and the civilization that they were a part of from the text itself. So rather than reading into the text what they believed, they're letting the text recite to them what it's saying without infusing it with something else foreign.
Yeah, and it was sorry if I cut you off at the end there.
No.
It was sort of because of certain strands of Christian dogma that throughout the medieval stage, the Renaissance, and I can point to some Enlightenment writers, the Corpus Hermeticum was being read by people living in the Christian worldview, so they wanted to make sure that they weren't crossing any kind of too controversial boundaries and so forth. So Robert Flood, for instance, he was sort of fitting Hermes in kind of the sense that he stole everything from Moses and didn't give Moses any credit.
Yeah.
Of course, that never happened, right? And then with Ramsey, who I love, but he also he's a in the 1700s he's quoting extensively from the Corpus Hermeticum, and he's sort of trying to fit in Christ as the incarnate Logos incarnate and the legitimate son of the universal God. He's also trying to fit that into his interpretations of Hermetica. And there's such a history of this that it created a lot of confusion. And of course you have Isaac Casaubon, who I believe got us really sort of hung up on the idea that the Hermetic texts were like Christian forgeries. He was accurate in the sense that they came later than people thought. They weren't contemporary with Moses, but then it was this whole, they're actually Christian forgeries. And that was created a devastating effect in terms of what later writers were going to actually quote from the Corpus Hermeticum anymore, because it wasn't going along the track as you would expect after a Bruno or a Ficino and everything else. They kind of, writers had to caveat extensively before quoting from the Corpus Hermeticum. And then, Ramsey put forward an argument as like, even if these were Christian forgeries, that's also interesting because these Christians are realizing that there's things that already align in their worldview, in these Hermetic texts. But yeah, that's a whole other sort of disentanglement of effort that needs to happen there.
Yeah, that's great.
So we're coming up to, 3.5 hours now, and I've been yapping and taking questions from the chat. Did you guys have any questions you wanted to fly by?
Well, not necessarily. I'm glad that this worked out kind of spontaneously too. But yes, I appreciate all of y'all's time. And
but isn't that exactly the notion that Hermes is present with us? Isn't that exactly an indication of that? It's spontaneous. It has to do with communication. It's disruptive. So it's very appropriate that we just randomly got called in. So I don't know. I think it's a sign. It's a good thing.
I love that.
Yeah,
perfection.
I saw that before we. I don't know. I'm not sure if you wanted to jump off, but I saw that in the chat that someone had a question, Ruben, about Edward Butler and his views on pluralism in relation to non-duality. I'm not sure if I understand the link with non-duality, but yeah, I mean, maybe that's another thing that we can talk about it for a separate time, because I feel like it's also a pretty big.
I was actually going to pull up his little question here and be like, well, as a send-off, guys, let's talk about ultimate reality.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going there. Let's do it.
What are your guys' thoughts on the ultimate nature of reality in terms of monism versus pluralism? Non-duality versus dualism.
I think the first thing to just say is like the idea of monism. So monism, if that's the ultimate nature of reality in terms of monism. Yeah, that's a really good question.
So it's like all one substance that just kind of plays with itself? Or
plays with itself. Yeah, of course. Per minute, like one of the things that has kind of like caught up a lot of people and a lot of scholars as well is this idea that Parmenides, when in his poem when he talks about one thing, right? The one, he means one thing. Like everything is reducible to one thing. It's one thing. But there's different ways of understanding oneness in Parmenides' poem. There's a numerical oneness, which is where all things are one thing. And then there's a predicational monism, where all things are one in the sense that every unit, everything is a oneness unto itself, which I believe we talked a little bit about, Richard, in our last conversation. And then there's this idea, I'm trying to remember what the third, and then there's one which like a substance type of monism, where all things are just one material. For example, like, Thales would talk about all things are made of water, right? All things are water. Or, all things are air, or Heraclitus, all things are fire. So there's that substance monism as well. And so I think like monism is a philosophical concept. It's not, I just want to make it just from the get-go, it's not an object of veneration or devotion. Monism is not monotheism, right? So monism is simply a philosophical position that all things are of the same essence or a similar essence to one another, that they can be reduced to a single type of essence. So with regard to nature of reality, I think it's both in a sense, but I think for me the pluralism, sort of the diversity of things is it gets into the metaphysics of it. Oneness is not there's an existential component that precedes the essence of something, and that allows for the individuality of all things, like all gods, for example, as henads, to quote unquote pre-exist. So they are at the level higher than the ones of manifestation. So it's very hard. So they're both a unity and the multiplicity, because each one contains both. So again, I'm here. I am on top of my head trying to articulate this, but I don't think it's one or the other. Let's just say that it's both.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Well, the ultimate nature of reality tends to allow for the most dazzling variety, right? So oneness at its outset, if you will, it's kind of like the first iteration of the one taking a motion produces all that is. So all we like to think of it as like this sort of linear numerological thing, but if we're really talking about, it's impossible to express. If we're really trying to conceptualize it, it's already impossible, but I guess we can try, like Pseudo Dionysius says, we will never understand the ultimate nature of reality, but it's like, if we live in an infinite reality, that whatever that ultimate nature of reality is will always be unfolding, and there will always be a sense of mystery within it, because infinity implies a continuation beyond our ability to ever conceive. It's so bizarre, like we cannot even suppose how amazing it could actually be. So if we think of it in terms of like physical matter, it's all like one atom reproducing itself in every place all at once, and every material object is really just manifestations of a single particle that is not bound by space, time, any form, anything, and it's already everywhere at once. So oneness is inseparable from infinite variety, because that is already how oneness has laid itself out. It's beginningless and it's endless. we like to think of these things in terms of the beginning and the end and have this cosmological linear, A to B to C thing, but it's always has only been this one thing. That kind of linear approach probably applies more to like the development of a solar system or something like that when we're zooming in to something. But in the grand scheme of things, it is this dazzling fractal that just continues to go on and on and on. And hopefully there will always be mysteries. There will always be, a real secret is never really solved. Like a real secret is always perpetual. So
yeah, there's always remainder. Yeah, absolutely. And just the last point, I mean, dualism, I mean, there's always a contingent dualism. So in certain writings, in the Hermetica or, even in some of the Neoplatonists, like dualism is a preliminary stage to allow you to realize that the world around you is not all that it seems, right? That there is something beneath the surface, that there is something to be sought after, that there's something to be working for, to realize. And even the idea of like hatefulness towards the world and the material world, I mean, that's only a preliminary step. It's not the true state of things. The world is a theophany. The matter is a theophany. Everything is imbued with the divine. There's no separation. But it's a readjustment of our perspective. It's a spark that allows us to pursue this path. And then you start to get into the non-dual nature of things. You start to realize that those distinctions that we make intellectually are not exactly how reality is constituted. Even the idea of the intelligible realm versus the sensible realm, we tend to compartmentalize these things as if they're two separate worlds, but they're not. They touch. So in that sense, a lot of this theurgic stuff can be said to be non-dualist. But again, I think Jung would say, you need a polar opposition in order for energy to be moving in a certain direction. You need that differential. You need that sort of actuality, potentiality to actuality. There has to be a measure of distance for something to actualize, and that gap, that separation, is you can't bridge it without having that as a precondition for your own very being itself. So again, if everything was just being, nothing would happen, nothing would change, nothing would come into being, right? You need that becoming, you need that distance, you need that separation for things to unfold and to be created. So again, it's tentative. It's a tentative dualism, because the world can't be constructed on two opposing evil and good structures, because evil cannot produce it's Proclus talks about parahypostasis. So it's literally what do you call it? It's like it's what's that? I'm really getting tired, but
panpsychism.
No. The sense when a virus takes parasitic. It's
pathogen.
Parasitic.
Oh.
It's parasitic. It's close. It's parasitic. Evil is parasitic on the good.
Yeah.
It cannot create anything on its own. It perverts. It destroys. It ruins what is already good, as in terms of a cosmos formation. Oh my God, you guys! I'm gonna. My brain is aching, but yeah, it was really great, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, boys. Thank you for talking about the nature of reality. Getting through. We do. This is 3.5 hours. This is the longest stream I've ever done. I don't know about you guys, but
I think this is the longest I've ever talked in my life. But, this was great.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a success. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Colin.
Yes, you as well. I look forward to more interactions and more videos. Great job, both of you guys, on all of your efforts. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, I'm gonna go put my tongue on a bed of ice or something. We'll see you all. Take care.
And see you all in the chat. Don't forget to like and subscribe definitely to Colin at American Esoteric. Follow us on all of our things, our Substacks, our channels. See more of them there. Goodbye.
Later.